Chapter 1108. That's right. At this time Makarov suddenly changed the topic. Speaking of the S-rank Archmage, this year seems to be coming soon, right? That? Noah was slightly startled. That? Elisha and Kildas were also startled, but then they seemed to have thought of something and suddenly understood. So another year has passed, Elusa said with a sigh. Time really flies. S-rank Archmage? Kildas was a little nostalgic. I haven't been in the guild for a long time. If the president didn't mention it, I almost forgot. Not only Elisha and Kildas, but even Mira and Lisanna, who were working at the bar, seemed to have noticed what Makarov was talking about. This year's is coming soon. Mira smiled gently as always. Naz and Gray should be very happy, right? Also, Brother Elf seems to have been looking forward to this matter. Lisanna also said with a smile. Plus, this year our guild also has a lot of capable newcomers. It will be very lively. Seeing that Elisha, Kildas, Mira, and even Lisanna understood Makarov's meaning, Noah was curious. What is that? As soon as this question came out, Makarov, Elisha, Kildas, Mira, and Lisanna were all startled, and then they reacted. Speaking of which, since many years ago when he got Kildas's magic crush, Noah has been away from the guild for a long time. Elisha reminded. In order to be able to fully control the magic crush, Noah trained outside for 4 years. Then he went to Celestial Wolf Island to receive the guidance of the first generation. Another 2 years passed and he didn't come back until recently. It hasn't even been half a year since he came back. After being reminded by Elisha, everyone was once again enlightened. Especially Kildas, who looked at Noah with some surprise in his eyes. Are you able to fully control the magic crush? Well, because I have been training my mana control for a long time since I was a child, I have some experience in controlling it. Although Noah didn't know why Elisha suddenly mentioned this matter, he still answered Kildas's question truthfully. But even so, it took me 4 years to fully control the magic crush. It only took you 4 years to control the magic crush, and you're still not satisfied. Kildas was speechless. Even until now, I still haven't been able to completely control the shattering magic. As expected of you. Now that you think about it, it's true that Big Brother Noah has only been back for less than half a year. Lisanna leaned on the bar and looked at Noah with eyes full of love. Feels like Big Brother Noah has been back for a long time. It's incredible. That's right. Mira also turned her gaze to Noah. Her eyes were closed as she smiled. It's like they've been together for a long time. Elisha looked at Noah with a gentle gaze after hearing Mira and Lisanna's words. On the other hand, Makarov and Kildas snickered at Noah with a wretched expression. Noah felt a little embarrassed and could only speak up helplessly. Stop talking in riddles. Hurry up and tell me what it is. However, Noah's words did not attract the attention of the group. Instead, they fell silent. If you think about it this way, Noah, Elisha said to Noah, you're not an S-rank magic shooter yet, right? That's right. Noah asked curiously. Is there a problem? There's a big problem. Makarov shouted at Noah, not even caring about the wine glass in his hand. Noah, for the next period of time, don't do anything. Spend all your time on work. Work. Noah was stunned. But I'm not short of money. Not only was he not short of money, Noah had a treasure trove full of gold and silver that could be replenished automatically. From now on, he would not have to worry about money. Under such circumstances, why would he spend his time on work? Did he have nothing better to do? However, in the face of Noah's words, not only Makarov, but even Mira, Lisanna, and Elisha were not willing to accept it. All right, Noah, just listen to the president, Mira said gently. For the next period of time, spend all your time on work. Don't worry about anything else. This time I won't help you, Noah, Elisha said seriously. This is for your own good. Hurry up and work hard, young man. Kildas smiled cheekily. Back in the day, I was also busy for a period of time. Everyone went through it like this. All in all, Big Brother Noah, don't worry about anything else. Work hard from now on. Lisanna was even more direct. She walked out of the bar and pushed Noah's back, pushing Noah in the direction of the stairs. You've been busy in Edras for so long. Big Brother Noah, you haven't had much rest. Have a good rest today. Work hard from tomorrow onwards. Wait, wait. Noah could only say gloomily as he was pushed away by Lisa. At least tell me what it is. All right. Lisa ignored Noah's protests and pushed Noah back into the room with a domineering look. Anyway, big brother Noah, have a good rest first. That's right. Thus, Noah could only return to the room with a bellyful of questions. After returning to the room, Noah lay on the bed with a gloomy expression. What's going on? From the reactions of Makarov, Kildas, Elusha, Mira, and Lisa, it seemed that something would happen in the guild soon. And this matter seemed to have something to do with the S-rank sorcerer. What does it have to do with the S-rank sorcerer? Noah frowned thoughtfully. I keep feeling that there is such a thing, but I can't remember. This could not be blamed on Noah. After all, just as Elusha said, Noah had already left Fairy Tale for more than 6 years. He had only returned to the guild for less than half a year. Of that time he had spent a month in another world. But because of the difference in time it seemed like a month to others, but to Noah it was more than half a year. In that case, Noah had not been in contact with the guild's matters for about 7 years. It was natural that he would forget something. Forget it. Since everyone has said so, it must be something important. I'll do more missions for now. Anyway, I have nothing to do. After making such a decision, Noah temporarily suppressed the depression and curiosity in his heart. Looking at the ceiling, he suddenly thought of something. Speaking of which, after leaving the dungeon, I haven't updated my ability points. After leaving the world of looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon, Noah had not updated his ability points. It was not because Noah had forgotten, but because after leaving the world of looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon, Noah had not experienced any decent battles. In the world of Elves Sword Dance, Noah had only experienced a few insignificant battles and battles. The only battles that could be converted into experience points and ability points were the battles with Lotus and Versilia. In this world, Noah had not experienced any decent battles, and the only battles that could be considered decent were few and far between. Under such circumstances, his ability value couldn't grow much. Thus, Noah had not updated his ability points. Let's see how much my ability points have increased. After saying that, Noah stood up and took off his shirt, revealing the complicated pattern on his back that represented God's grace. After transforming the source of mana in his body into a source of divine power, Noah adjusted the divine power and made it flow throughout his body. Wong! A faint blue light bloomed. Chapter 1109. A mysterious blue light bloomed from Noah's back, illuminating the entire surrounding space. In the blue light on Noah's back, the complicated and mysterious characters that were originally engraved around the fire-like pattern began to float, and as if they had gained life, they constantly rotated, jumped, and even changed. What Noah needed to do was to absorb the experience points accumulated from the previous battles into his body, which was filled with divine power. Then he would use the divine power to draw out the experience points and turn them into actual nourishment, changing them into ability points, and increasing the extent of his ability points. Over time, the mysterious characters that were rotating, jumping, and even changing on Noah's back gradually changed, and one by one, they lined up and returned to Noah's back, engraved on it. Not long after, most of the mysterious characters around the fire-like pattern that was originally engraved on Noah's back changed. If Noah could see his back, he would be surprised, because there were suddenly a lot more sacred characters on it. Of course, Noah could not see the ability points on his back. However, perhaps because Noah's ability points were updated by himself, when the blue light on Noah's back gradually disappeared, a burst of information suddenly came from the ability points on Noah's back and rushed into Noah's mind. This burst of information recorded the information of Noah's ability points that had been updated at this moment. When Noah received this burst of information and knew the status of his ability points, Noah immediately opened his eyes. His eyes were full of astonishment. Noah Dole LV. 4 Strength, A846, S966. Durability, A868, S976. Dexterity, A855, S970. Agility, A873, S985. Magic, A842, S959. Mystery, HG Magic, IH Swordsman, IH Magic, Weapon Refining Steel Making Magic. Copy, refine, and forge weapons. Replicated, refined, and forged weapons will be weakened to a certain extent, depending on the level, performance, and ability of the weapon. Replicating, refining, and forging weapons will depend on the weapon's level, performance, and ability to maintain the weapon for a certain period of time. Protection of the sword. Resident magic. Obtain permanent protection according to the attributes of the contracted spirit. Contract a sword spirit as a sword spirit. Obtain the sword spirit's protection and weaken physical attacks. The degree of weakening depends on the strength and ability of the target. Cold smelting. Quick attack magic. Gradually turn the target into steel. Once the tempering is successful, it will be crushed. The tempering speed depends on the strength and ability of the target. Skills. Protection from the world. It was a permanent skill. Equal to luck. Events that were directly related to luck would eventually lead to the most favorable outcome. A large amount of information filled Noah's mind. After understanding the situation of his ability value, Noah's face was full of shock. After a while, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I didn't expect that my magic would be discovered. Those who had received the grace of God had also received the grace of magic from the very beginning. In the world of looking for a chance encounter in the underground city, magic was originally something that only magic races who were born with the talent to practice magic could possess. Humans and most other races were unable to receive the favor of magic. However, God's favor allowed everyone to receive equal treatment in magic. To say that it was equal treatment in magic was not the right way to put it. Because even if one received God's favor, if the possibility of receiving it was too low, then even if one was qualified to learn magic, if the possibility of awakening magic in one's body could not be awakened, then it would just be an empty bar, and one would not be able to discover their own magic for the rest of their life. But on the other hand, as long as there was an empty bar, then no matter who it was, they could discover their own magic and obtain the power of magic. As for the empty bar, those who received God's favor could at least get one, and at most 3. Noah had the most 3 and he had 3 empty bars. Now these 3 empty slots were all filled up. How could Noah not be shocked? But immediately after, Noah did not know whether to laugh or cry. There was no other reason. The 3 magic that he discovered were all elven magic from the world of elven sword dance. Has-T once said that the discovery of magic is the same as the discovery of skills. It is based on a person's experience, nature, interests and wishes, and various other reasons to awaken it. Noah sighed. It seems that my contract with Aster, and thus I obtained the ability to learn and use elven magic with the steel attribute, was excavated by God's favor and treated as magic. You discovered it, right? Originally, if one wanted to learn elven magic, they would need to go through systematic learning and practice, and they would need to have a certain level of talent to be able to learn elven magic. But now, because of God's favor, Noah directly skipped the learning and practice stage, and was forced to discover 3 elven magic, and these 3 elven magic became magic that he obtained with the help of his ability points. What's more, there's a low-level, mid-level, and high-level magic spell each. Elven magic was also divided into levels. Among the 3 spells that Noah had discovered, there was a low-level, mid-level, and high-level elven magic spell each. Among them, the low-level elven magic was weapon refinement. This elven magic was one of the basic elven magic that could be learned after contracting with the steel attribute sword spirit. It could only copy, refine, and forge ordinary weapons, so that the elven user would not be able to fight empty-handed. It could not copy, refine, or forge elven equipment, so the elven magic was of the lowest level. The medium-level elven magic was sword protection. This elven magic was somewhat practical. It could determine the strength of the protection depending on the level of the contracted spirit and the amount of divine energy. Once this magic was used, it could weaken physical attacks to a certain extent, which was very good. As for the high-level elven magic, it was cold smelt. This elven magic, when Noah contracted with Aster, in order to get rid of Noah, Aster used it in the form of a sword. At that time, if it was not for Noah's curse resistance, one of his arms would have already turned into steel. Presumably, if it was a normal elven user who was subjected to this magic, they would definitely turn into cold steel in a short period of time, right? However, this powerful magic had a fatal flaw. That was, it had to come into contact with the target in order to be effective. For Noah, with such a restriction, It would be better to just directly open the gate of Babylon and use the violent force of his noble artifact to get rid of the enemy. As for the weapon refinement, it could only copy, refine, and forge ordinary weapons. It could not even create elven equipment. In the hands of Noah, who had an endless supply of noble artifacts, it was simply a chicken rib of chicken ribs. Therefore, among the three magic, the sword protection was actually a bit useful to Noah. Originally, Noah's curse resistance was already quite high, so normal people could only use physical attacks to deal with Noah. Now, with the addition of the sword protection that could weaken physical attacks, Noah was really starting to walk on the path of invincibility. However, it seems that because of the magic found in the grace, these elven magic seem to have some changes. Noah pondered over the feedback of the ability value. After pondering for a while, he nodded. Let's try out the icy smelting first. After making up his mind, Noah immediately wanted to find something to try. However, in the next moment, something that Noah did not expect happened. Just as Noah uttered the words icy smelting, in the direction that Noah was looking at, a vase placed on the windowsill suddenly trembled. In the next second, the vase turned into heavy ice-cold steel. Under the sunlight, it reflected a cold arc. Seeing this, Noah was stunned. Then immediately, his eyes suddenly lit up. Chapter 11:10. Looking at the vase that suddenly turned into cold steel without any warning, Noah's eyes lit up. He quickly got up, went to the window and picked up the vase. The heavy and cold feeling in his hands told Noah that the vase had indeed turned into steel. Without a doubt, the reason why the vase suddenly turned into steel could only be because Noah had activated icy smelting. But I didn't touch the vase at all. I just looked at it unintentionally. Feeling the heavy and cold feeling of the vase in his hands, Noah's heart settled. He turned his head and looked at the other vase at the head of the bed. Normally, when magic was discovered, the incantation needed to activate the magic would also be displayed. However, Noah's icy smelting did not display the incantation. Instead, it was marked with the words, Quick Attack Magic. This proved that this magic did not need an incantation, and could be activated in an instant. Then, in this case, without an incantation, what was the trigger for this magic to be activated? This Noah also did not know. However, just now Noah did intend to activate icy smelting to test the power of this high-level elven magic. In other words, the trigger for this magic to be activated came from Noah's own will. In other words, if he wanted to activate it, he would immediately activate it. At this moment, Noah took a deep breath and looked at the vase at the head of the bed. This moment, Noah's dark and deep pupils suddenly turned into a cold silver-white color, flashing with a crystal-like light. Kacha? At the same time, on the vase that Noah was looking at, a crisp sound that sounded like ice being frozen faintly sounded. Kacha kacha kacha. In the next moment, in the midst of the sound of ice, the vase gradually turned into cold steel starting from the base. Not long after, it was completely covered by steel. The silver-white pupils that were flashing with a crystal-like light slowly returned to the deep and calm darkness of an ancient well. However, that did not stop Noah from feeling excited. Under the situation of being discovered as a magic by grace, the cold smelting that originally required physical contact to be effective was actually effective by just casting one's gaze? Wasn't this the steel version of the demon eye of petrification? I thought this spell wouldn't be very practical. Now I have to change my mind. Noah glanced at the vase that had turned into cold steel, and his heart skipped a beat. Bang! The vase, which had turned into cold steel, suddenly exploded into pieces and fell to the ground. This was the other effect of cold smelting. As long as it was successfully tempered, it could shatter the tempered part at any time. Noah could already imagine how desperate his enemies would be in the face of this spell. However, the speed of tempering depends on the opponent's strength and ability. The stronger the opponent, the slower the tempering speed. Even so, Noah was not disappointed. I wonder if there are any changes to the other two spells? Thinking of this, Noah put the other tempered vase back on the windowsill and removed the tempering effect. Thus, the lifeless steel vase that was just a second ago returned to its original state. After doing this, Noah sat back on the bed and stretched out a hand. Cold smelting was a quick attack spell. It did not require an incantation, and could be activated in an instant by relying on Noah's will. The sword's protection was a permanent spell. It did not need to be activated. From the moment the spell was cast, it would always be in effect. It would only take effect when Noah was under physical attack, weakening the physical attack that Noah was under. Only weapon refinement was not a quick attack spell nor a permanent spell. It also did not require an incantation. Then what was the trigger to activate this spell? Noah seemed to understand the method as if he was enlightened. He focused his mind. At this time in Noah's mind, the image of a sword gradually emerged. Clang! Almost at the same time in Noah's outstretched hand, a dazzling light bloomed. The light gradually swelled and slowly elongated into the shape of a sword. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and the light immediately dissipated into specks of light. However, a sword appeared in Noah's hand out of thin air. That sword was exactly the same as the image that appeared in Noah's mind. And this sword, the body of the sword was silver, the blade was gold, and the hilt was dark blue. The whole body of the sword was flowing with a bright golden light. Impressively, it was the Excalibur. Tightly holding the sacred sword that he created, Noah's expression was half happy and half worried. Noah was overjoyed because he sensed a power and aura from the copied holy sword that an ordinary weapon definitely didn't have. This sacred sword was definitely not an empty shell. It even had the power of its original form. At this point Noah was finally sure. The low-level elven magic called weapon refinement was not only able to copy, refine and forge ordinary weapons. This magic could even create treasures, elven equipment, and magical weapons that belonged to the category of weapons. How could Noah not be happy? But he was worried because the sacred sword that Noah created did not have the same power as a real sacred sword. Its level has dropped by at least one level. Noah silently felt the power of the sacred sword in his hand. It is equivalent to a grade B++. Moreover, it can only be maintained for about 10 minutes. Thinking of this, the image of the sacred sword in Noah's mind slowly disappeared. The sacred sword that was quietly lying in Noah's hand suddenly followed the image in Noah's mind and gradually disappeared into thin air. Clang! However, in the next moment, another ray of light bloomed in Noah's hand. However, this time, the ray of light bloomed on Noah's entire arm and condensed into form. When the ray of light dissipated, a pair of gauntlets appeared on Noah's hand. A pair of ferocious dragon claws, with a green jade gauntlet on the back of the gauntlet. It was the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Even the sacred gear can be created? Noah closed his eyes and felt the power of the gauntlet. However, the multiplier effect can only be stacked 5 times at most. The duration is also only 10 minutes. I can't use the balance breaker there. The power is also weakened. Letting the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear disappear along with the image in his mind, Noah's mind was once again filled with the image of a pair of beautiful light wings. A ray of light flashed behind Noah's back and turned into a pair of white wings that seemed to have been carefully made. The surface of the wings was like a light film that flashed with a faint blue light. Other than the White Dragon Emperor's light wings, divine dividing. That was opposite to the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. What else was there? The halved effect can only be stacked 5 times at most. The duration is still 10 minutes. And I can't use the balance breaker there. In just a moment, Noah knew the limitations of the White Dragon Emperor's light wings, divine dividing. However, as long as it is in the category of a weapon, it can be created. This I understand. Other than that, Noah also understood another thing. That was, unlike the icy smelting, the reason why the weapon refinement magic was able to replicate and create weapons with power, such as noble artifacts, elven devices and magical weapons was not because it was discovered as magic by the grace. The reason why the weapon refinement had such a huge change was because of one of Noah's development abilities that had not been used until now. Mystery. This development ability that could allow people to create miracles like God was the reason why the weapon refinement had such a huge change. I still need to continue exploring. For a moment, Noah was immersed in trying out the new power that he had obtained. Chapter 11:11. After the 3 magic slots were filled, Noah also found some time to familiarize himself with the 3 spells: weapon refinement, swords protection, and icy smelting. In elven magic, these 3 spells were respectively ranked as low, medium, and high. After being discovered as magic by Noah's favor, these 3 spells were improved by more than 1 level in terms of power, level, and practicality. For example, the spell Weapon Refinement could only be used to create normal weapons. Even the elven device could not create the most basic elven magic of the steel attribute. Most elven users would only use this spell as an introductory practice for elven magic. Not many would actually use this low-level elven magic in battle. However, with the support of mystery, this low-level elven magic spell was completely transformed. It was not just normal weapons. As long as it belonged to the category of weapons, then no matter if it was a noble artifact, an elven device, or a magical weapon with weapon refinement, it could be created. Although there were thousands of noble artifacts in Noah's treasure vault, if the level of the weapon created by weapon refinement was too high, then there would be issues with level weakening and maintenance time. It seemed to be very useless, but Noah only had noble artifacts. Like Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear and White Dragon Emperor's light wings, Noah did not have any of those. To be able to use weapon refinement to create these sacred gear, even if there were still issues with level weakening and maintenance time, but to be able to use the power of these sacred gear, it was still a gain. Not to mention, Noah still had many worlds that he had not been to. Who knew if there would be more interesting weapons in those worlds? Therefore, the weapon refinement spell was still quite useful. As for the sword's protection spell that could weaken physical attacks against Noah, it was also quite useful for Noah, who had the curse resistance and was immune to most mystical powers. As for icy smelting, this steel version of the Eye of Petrification did not need to be mentioned. The only weakness of these three spells was that they consumed a lot of mana. Don't forget, it was different from normal magic. The magic in the world of looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon was rather traditional magic. When used, it consumed mana converted from mental strength. Noah's magic power was endless. However, spiritual power was a different story. Of course, thanks to Noah's extraordinary soul, coupled with the specialization of the Daybreak Star pattern that could strengthen the mind in the world of absolute dual blades, Noah's mind power could be considered terrifying compared to ordinary people. But naturally, it could not be compared to magic power, divine power, which could be said to be endless. Therefore, this was still a problem. Furthermore, each of the three spells had their own limitations. For example, the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear and White Dragon Emperor's light wings, divine dividing, that were created through weapon refinement could double the strength and reduce the strength 5 times each. However, the limitation of being able to double and reduce the strength once every 10 seconds meant that they were destined to be very limited in actual combat. Similarly, although icy smelting could turn people into steel in an instant, even if only a part of the body was turned into steel, Noah could directly crush that part of the steel, causing great damage to the enemy. It seemed very terrifying, but there were other ways to resist it. Just like in the world of the shaped moon, perhaps the enemy's power was too strong, so it could weaken the effect of this spell to a certain extent, or even make it ineffective. Therefore, among the three spells, only the sword's protection spell did not have so many restrictions. In general, the extent of the power of these three spells depended on how Noah used them. Although for the current Noah, adding 3 more spells wouldn't increase his strength by too much, Linley thought to himself, that's right. After all, it was only 3 spells. After spending some time familiarizing himself with these 3 spells, Noah began his busy life. To be more precise, it was under the supervision of Mira, Lysana, and the others that he lived a busy life. I'm back. After coming in from outside, Noah slowly exhaled and greeted his companions in the guild. Big brother Noah, welcome back. Lysana, who was busy at the bar, immediately put down what she was doing and took out a thick stack of papers from the bar counter. She smiled sweetly in front of Noah. Is the work done? Yes. Noah nodded. It's not very difficult work, I've already finished it. Is that so? Lysana nodded thoughtfully, then took out a piece of paper from the stack of papers in her arms and handed it to Noah with a smile. Then the next job is this. More. Noah's face was bitter. I've already done 3 missions today. Well, those 3 missions are just a piece of cake for big brother Noah. Why don't you do more? Lysana looked as if she was worried about her husband's career. After stuffing the commission into Noah's arms, she pushed Noah out. Anyway, big brother Noah doesn't look tired at all. There's nothing to do in the guild anyway, so work harder. Yes, yes, yes. Noah could only helplessly take the commission and leave the guild under Lysana's smiling gaze. Mira, who was also busy at the bar counter, smiled knowingly. The rest of the companions looked at each other. Why does it feel like Noah has been working recently? Lucy asked curiously. Could it be that Noah is short on money? Who knows? Gray crossed his arms and teased. Maybe he's planning to collect money for a wedding. That's hard to say. Wedding? When she found that her friends were looking at her strangely, she coughed awkwardly and pretended to be serious and said, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Unfortunately, this time you guessed wrong. Noah is busy with work because of something very important. Something very important. Naz, who was gnawing on a drumstick, turned his head while eating. What's the matter? Have you all forgotten? Elisha frowned and reminded them. This year's that one is coming again. That one. Naz and Gray were stunned together. Then they thought of something and their faces changed. They got up abruptly and screamed. Oh, I forgot. Suddenly, both Naz and Gray rushed to the notice board with amazing momentum. They tore off a commission order and rushed to the front of the bar counter. Mira, I want to take this mission. Me too. I'll take this. Yes. Myra's smile was still gentle. Please take care. So Naz and Gray rushed out and almost bumped into Wendy, who had just come in from outside and was still holding Xia Lulu in her arms. Wendy was shocked. The fuss of Naz and Gray seemed to have attracted the attention of the rest of the members in the guild. After a while, the entire guild became lively. It seems that Naz and Gray have finally started to go crazy. With Noah, this year should be very interesting, right? We can't lose. Yeah. In conversations similar to the above, some people continued to talk and laugh, while others, like Naz and Gray, rushed to the mission board where the commission order was posted, and it became crowded. Seeing this scene, Wendy and Lucy were puzzled. Seeing Wendy and Lucy's puzzled look, Elisha smiled. Don't worry, it's not a bad thing. Just look forward to it first. Wendy and Lucy looked at each other and could only nod their heads. In the corner of the guild, Kana, who was holding a wine barrel, was looking in the direction of the mission board with a gloomy face. Chapter 11:12. As the entire fairy tale fell into an unprecedented situation, or perhaps it could be said to be as lively and noisy as ever, in the following period of time, many sorcerers in the guild, including Noah, began to crazily complete quests. For example, Naz, Gray, Elfman, and even Lebby, the first-rate members and potential members of Fairy Tale, had recently vented all their passion and time on missions. On the other hand, Makeo, Wakaba, Wendy, Lucy, and the rest of the Fairy Tale veterans and rookies were the same as before. They still did what they were supposed to do. At most, they would complain about Naz, Gray, and the others making a ruckus. As for the S-rank magic shooters like Alusa, Mira, Kildas, and the rest of the Fairy Tale S-rank magic shooters, it was as if they were looking at their former selves. They silently watched the crowd fall into a frenzy for the sake of the mission, and from time to time, they would smile knowingly. Only Lisanna seemed to have really become Noah's housekeeper. Whenever Noah went out to do missions, she would help Noah find missions of good difficulty and reward in advance. When Noah returned, she would hand those missions over to Noah, becoming the standard virtuous wife. It wasn't just Lisanna. Even Mira would sometimes pay special attention to Noah's mission progress. Just like Lisanna, she looked as if she couldn't wait for Noah to be busier and complete more missions. This made Noah begin to suspect whether the two delicate fiancés really wanted him to raise money for their wedding. Fortunately, Noah had just obtained 3 new magic spells, and was in the experimental and exploratory stage. The accumulation of a large number of tasks also gave Noah a lot of opportunities to practice. Hence, he managed to master the 3 new magic spells like the back of his hand. Seeing that even Naz, Gray, Elfman, and Lebby had fallen into a vortex of crazily completing missions, Noah's curiosity towards that so-called thing in his heart grew and he actually began to look forward to it. This kind of life was maintained for quite a long time. It ended abruptly as well. On this day, Noah had yet to wake up when the door to his room was gently opened. As expected, he's still not up yet? Mira walked in from outside the door and looked at Noah, who was sleeping soundly on the bed. She smiled gently and deliberately slowed down her footsteps and quietly walked into the room. In fact, Mira knew that even if she didn't deliberately go easy on him, Noah still wouldn't wake up. Although she didn't know the existence of Noah's sensory ability, She knew that if someone approached Noah with hostility, malice, or killing intent, they would definitely wake Noah up in an instant. On the contrary, Noah had been sleeping on the same bed as Mira and Lisanna, who couldn't be any more familiar with him. Unless they deliberately made a sound, Noah would be at ease and appear unguarded. Coming to the bedside, Mira was just about to wake Noah up when she suddenly thought of something and gently lifted Noah's blanket. On top of Noah's body, a young elf girl with long silver hair that reached her waist was hugging Noah's neck. She was also in a state of deep sleep and seemed to be very peaceful. Mira was already used to this and only muttered in a slightly reproachful voice, "At least you should let Aster wear clothes, right?" Almost every morning, Aster would remove his sword form and transform back into his human form, burrowing into Noah's bed under the pretext of accompanying him to sleep. If it weren't for the recent missions, either Mira or Lisanna would wake Noah up in the morning. When Aster woke up, he would definitely have the mission of waking Noah up. Moreover, he would do it in a way that would make Mira and Lisanna envious. But recently, this mission had been taken over by Mira and Lisanna. Even Wendy couldn't get in on it, much to Aster's dissatisfaction. Moreover, Aster was someone who got jealous easily and had rich feelings that were far from what he appeared to be on the surface. Recently, he had been at loggerheads with Noah quite a bit. Of course, in the eyes of others, Aster's loggerheads were all kinds of cute. That was why even Lisanna couldn't bring herself to hate Aster, let alone the gentle and kind Mira. On the contrary, she liked the petite and cute Aster and almost raised her as her own daughter. Mira stroked Aster's head lightly, then looked at Noah and shook his body. "Noah, it's time to wake up." Noah's brows were clearly furrowed, but he didn't wake up. Instead, he slept even more soundly. "Don't sleep, Noah." Mira could only increase her strength. "Today is a very important day. You can't sleep anymore." "Ugh." Noah finally let out a groggy sound. His eyelids fluttered a few times, but in the end he didn't wake up. "Seriously," Mira said helplessly. "If you don't wake up soon, I'm going to do something bad." With that, Mira looked at Noah's lips. Her eyes flickered a few times, and she couldn't help but kiss them lightly. However, before Mira could leave Noah's lips, one of Noah's hands suddenly reached out and grabbed Myra's slender waist. In turn, he pried open Myra's teeth and captured her lips and tongue. Ugh! Mira didn't know what to do and subconsciously struggled. After a while, she stopped and closed her eyes, passively accepting Noah's domineering kiss. After an unknown amount of time, Noah and Myra's lips finally parted slowly. "Ha!" Mira couldn't help but gasp. Then she saw Noah's slightly mischievous gaze and smile. How was he as muddle-headed as before? Noah had clearly woken up a long time ago and was purposely messing with Mira. Realizing this, Mira puffed up her cheeks and said angrily, "Noah, you've become naughty." "Is that so?" Looking at Myra's cute puffed-up cheeks, Noah couldn't help but reach out and pinch Myra's nose. "Then do you like it?" "I hate it the most." Mira rolled her eyes at Noah. Then she knocked on Noah's chest. "Hurry up and let go. Now." Noah blinked. "Can't we stay like this for a while longer?" "No." Mira reached out her finger and tapped Noah's nose. The anger on her face turned back to her usual gentleness. "If you don't let go, someone is going to get angry." After saying this, a cold gaze landed on Noah. Noah's eyelids twitched. He stiffened his neck and looked to the side. There, Aster looked at Noah without saying a word. His entire body was filled with an indescribable boldness. That boldness was all transformed from anger. Because in order to tease Mira, Noah squeezed the sleeping Aster out when he hugged Mira. While this woke Aster up, it also made him angry. "Master." Aster stared at Noah expressionlessly. "I was squeezed out." "That?" Noah laughed dryly. "I didn't do it on purpose." "Master." Aster still stared at Noah expressionlessly. "I was squeezed out." The corner of Noah's mouth twitched as he said resentfully, "That's why I didn't do it on purpose." "Master." Aster interrupted Noah's explanation and stared at Noah. "I was squeezed out." "Okay." Noah could only helplessly lower his head. "It's my fault, Aster. Forgive me." Only then did Aster's cold expression slightly ease up, making Mira unable to restrain a smile. Aster glanced at Mira. Then, he hugged Noah's neck and declared, "This is my master." I won't steal Aster's master. Mira smiled. She extended her hand and gently stroked Aster's head. However, Noah belongs to all of us. You can't monopolize him. At that moment, even Aster couldn't resist Myra's gentle aura. He was speechless. Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that there was finally someone who could control this slightly willful sword spirit. Chapter 11:13. After playing around for a while, Aster transformed back into the form of a small sword and was pinned to the back of Noah's waist. By the way, under Myra's service, Noah obediently allowed Mira to help him put on his clothes like a newlywed wife. Suddenly, he recalled Myra's words. Lowering his head, he looked at Mira, who was helping him tidy up his collar, and said, "You just said that today is a very important day. What day is it? Do you want to know?" Mira didn't even raise her head. She still helped Noah tidy up his clothes and smiled slightly. "When you go down, you will know." Go down? Noah was a little curious. Did anything happen? It's a good thing, Mira said with a smile. Soon you will know that the hard work during this period of time is worth it. Listening to Myra's words that seemed to be pretending to be mysterious and deliberately whetting his appetite, Noah could only shrug, but he was looking forward to it in his heart. No matter what, during this period of time, Noah did work hard to complete a lot of commissions, so much so that he earned about 10 million in remuneration alone. If the result of such hard work couldn't be exchanged for a sufficient surprise, it would be too disappointing, wouldn't it? After dressing and washing up, Noah took Mira downstairs and came to the guild hall on the first floor. As soon as he stepped into the guild hall, many people turned their attention to Noah. Coming. Nazi looked particularly excited. His eyes looking at Noah were even full of fighting spirit. Very good, I'm burning. You're the only one left, Noah. Gray's mood seemed to be much higher than before, and he grinned at Noah. Sure enough, only this time is exciting. In addition to Naz and Gray, Lucy, who was on the side, had a puzzled look on her face. She almost had the word "what" engraved on her face. As for Elusha, it was rare that she was not present. Wendy was the only one who trotted to Noah with small steps. She raised her head and gave Noah a cheerful smile. Good morning, Brother Noah. Good morning, Wendy. Noah reached out and patted Wendy's head out of habit. You're very energetic today too. Yes. Wendy nodded her head heavily. Her mood was much better than before. Because everyone in the guild seems to be very excited today. Noah only noticed it after Wendy mentioned it. At this very moment, almost all the sorcerers of Fairy Tale were gathered in one place. They did not go out to work, nor did they eat and drink, nor did they chat. Instead, they were gathered together, restless as they discussed something. In Fairy Tale, there was a stage that looked like a stage. Now the stage was covered by a curtain, as if there was some kind of program being prepared. A group of sorcerers from Fairy Tale were gathered in front of the stage. Looking at the stage covered by the curtain and the scene of his companions gathering together, Noah could not help but stare blankly. What's going on? As soon as his voice fell, a clear voice responded to Noah's question. Later, the chairman will have something important to announce. As she said this, Lysana appeared behind Noah without anyone noticing. She jumped onto Noah's back and hugged his neck. Good morning, Brother Noah. Good morning, Lysana. Noah could not hide his curiosity as he asked, Is it related to the work you've been doing for me all this time? Of course. Lysana pressed her cheek against Noah's cheek. Her intimate appearance made Wendy extremely envious. Big Brother Noah, you will soon know that your efforts during this period of time were definitely not in vain. Noah nodded expectantly, causing Mira, who was beside him, to grin. Then you guys chat first. I have to go and prepare. After saying this, she did not give Noah time to react and directly left in the direction of the stage. Oh right. Noah looked around. Why don't I see Elusha? Now that you mention it, Brother Noah. Wendy looked around the room. Indeed, I don't see Miss Elusha. It's not just Elusha, Kildas is not here either. Lysana jumped down from Noah's back and came to Noah's side with a sweet smile. But later, all the S-rank magic shooters in the guild will be gathered. All of them? Noah raised an eyebrow. It seemed that something important was going to happen today. As time passed, the atmosphere in the guild became more and more lively. Noah, Lisa, and Wendy chatted intermittently. It was rare for them to be so relaxed. Until a certain moment, an old but powerful voice resounded throughout the entire guild. "Everyone, be quiet." Along with this voice, all the magic shooters in the guild quivered and quietened down. Noah also raised his head and looked in the direction of the stage. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, the curtain on the high platform slowly rose. In the next moment, a few figures appeared on the stage one after another. The one in the lead was naturally Makarov. Behind Makarov, 4 figures stood side by side. Alusha, Mira, Kildas. The 3 active S-rank magic shooters belonging to Fairy Tail were led by Makarov, the guild's president, and lined up behind him. In addition to Alusha, Mira, and Kildas, there was one more person. A person who surprised everyone present. Noah in particular almost subconsciously cried out in surprise. Laxus. Impressively, it was the president of Fairy Tail, the grandson of Makarov, one of the 10 Saint Magi, and Noah's sworn brother Laxus Doria. Laxus, Naz, Gray, Lucy, and the others were shocked. Even Lisa didn't seem to know that Laxus would appear here and exclaimed, "Why is he here?" "Oh." Wendy looked at Laxus's fierce face and somewhat shrunk behind Noah's back. "It feels a little scary." On the other hand, Laxus ignored the noise of the crowd and cast his gaze on Noah with a somewhat violent smile on his face. "Looks like you've been doing well recently." "You?" Noah was startled. "Why are you here?" "Why what?" Laxus crossed his arms and closed his eyes. "I just came back." "Wasn't the time set by you?" "I said it." Noah frowned at first, then finally remembered. Last time, because of the trouble Laxus had caused, when Makarov had planned to expel Laxus from the guild, Noah had protected Laxus in the name of the next president. It was only a symbolic punishment of confinement for a period of time. Now that he thought about it carefully, it seemed that the confinement time had indeed come. "As soon as I was released, I was caught by Grandpa," Laxus said to Noah as if he found it troublesome, but also as if he was eager to give it a try. "But this is good too. If you want to become an S-rank archmage, let me be your obstacle." "S-rank archmage?" Noah raised an eyebrow. Seeing that the atmosphere between Noah and Laxus was no longer as dangerous as before, Makarov was happy in his heart. At the same time, he coughed dryly, looked at everyone below the high platform, and said in a clear voice, "According to the rules of Fairy Tail since ancient times, now, I will announce the list of candidates for the S-rank Archmage promotion exam." The whole audience suddenly went silent. "Oh!" In the next second, deafening cheers resounded throughout Fairy Tail. S-rank Archmage promotion exam. Lucy, Wendy, and the others who had just joined the guild were completely shocked. Not to mention Lucy and Wendy, even Noah had a look of amazement on his face. S-rank Archmage promotion exam? Has it already reached this stage? Chapter 11:14. The S-rank Magic Shooter Advancement Test. As the name implied, it was a test that would allow those who passed to be promoted to the highest rank in the guild, S-rank. In Fairy Tail, there were only 4 S-rank magic shooters in active service. Alusha, Mira, Kildas, and Laxus, a total of 4. Every single one of these 4 people possessed extremely powerful strength. Among them, Kildas and Laxus even had the ability to become one of the 10 great Saint Magi. Alusha was also not far from becoming one of the 10 great Saint Magi. Even Mira had strength that the other magic shooters in Fairy Tail did not have, and there was no need to doubt her battle prowess. Becoming an S-rank magic shooter meant that one would be on the same level as the 4 of them. In addition, becoming an S-rank magic shooter meant standing at the forefront of the entire guild. They could also undertake S-rank missions, SS-rank missions, 10-year missions, and even 100-year missions, and other missions with high difficulty and generous rewards. In this way, who wouldn't want to gain both fame and fortune? Other guilds aside, in Fairy Tail, every year there would be an S-rank magic shooter advancement test. There was no limit to the number of candidates, the venue was not fixed, and the content was unknown. It would only be announced after the list of candidates for the S-rank magic shooter advancement test was finalized. To be selected, one not only needed to have a certain amount of strength, but also a certain amount of experience, as well as the approval of the guild leader and the guild members. Why did Mira and Lisa let Noah spend all his time on work during this period? It was to let Noah have enough experience to qualify for the S-rank magic shooter advancement test. I see. Noah glanced at the smiling Lisa and said helplessly. So they made me work so hard for the S-rank magic shooter advancement test? It was impossible for Noah, who had grown up in fairy tale, to not know about the S-rank magic shooter advancement test. However, after being away for so long, Noah had long forgotten that the S-rank magic shooter advancement test was held every year at this time. That was why he hadn't reacted to it. Now that he understood what was going on, Noah's eyes could not help but flash with some excitement. As mentioned before, Noah would sooner or later take over the position of Fairy Tale's guild leader. He would inherit the guild from Makarov and protect this place that was equivalent to Noah's home. As for the previous 3 presidents of Fairy Tale, almost all of them were famous figures. If Noah were to become the 4th guild leader, he could not let his position fall. That was why Noah's initial goal was to become an S-rank magic shooter. Now the moment had finally arrived. Even Noah couldn't help but feel excited. At the same time, Makarov began to announce the list of candidates for the S-rank magic shooter advancement test. This year, there are a total of 7 magic shooter advancement magic shooters. The magic shooter mirror magic shooter shooters magic shooter shooters. Clank. Suddenly, a curtain of light shot out from the crystal ball and hovered in midair. On the light screen there were 7 portraits of people. Below each person's portrait there was a name. Noah Doria, Naz Dolagner, Gray Falpast, Elfman Strauss, Gadgera Wright Fox, Julian Rox, Katrina Arapolona. A total of 7 names appeared on the screen together with the portraits of Noah and the other magic shooters, and were imprinted in the eyes of everyone present. That was the list of candidates for this year's S-rank magic shooter promotion exam. That's great. Naz shouted excitedly. Why am I behind Naz? Gray said with a smile on his face. Be a man. You should become an S-rank magic shooter. Elfman clenched his fists, unable to hide his excitement. I didn't expect that. When I saw that guy busy with work, I couldn't help but get busy as well. I was actually selected. Gadgera grinned and glanced in Noah's direction. He was also somewhat excited. Why is Julian included as well? Julian also glanced at Noah but shrunk his head. Just like before, he was still somewhat afraid of Noah. Only Katrina was not too excited, nor did she show any expression. She just closed her eyes, and the atmosphere around her was more or less heavy. Katrina. Lucy looked at Katrina with some worry, and secretly decided to have a good chat with Katrina after this. As for Noah, he was deep in thought as he looked at the light screen that displayed the names of the 7 people. Almost all of them are people below S rank in the guild who are active on the front lines? Wasn't that right? Apart from Noah, Naz, Gray, Elfman, Gadgeru, Julianne, and Katrina were all the strongest magic shooters in Fairy Tale apart from the S-rank magic shooters. Noah was not surprised that there was such a group of people who could be selected for the S-rank magic shooter advancement test. Originally in Lax's Thor gang, there were 3 people like Fried, Bikesro, and Ibarglin who were at the front lines. If they had worked hard, there should have been 1 or 2 people who could have been selected, Lisa said with some regret. However, due to Rax's confinement, Fried and the others insisted on accompanying him no matter what. During this period of time they didn't have any work to do and weren't active enough. That's why they were eliminated. Noah nodded in understanding and cast his gaze on the high platform. There, Makarov raised the crutch in his hand and pointed at the light screen next to him. The selected magic shooters will have a period of preparation time. Before the preparation time is over, everyone must choose a partner in the guild. Partner. Noah's heart skipped a beat. In other words, the S-rank magic shooter advancement test this time is actually a pair of 2? That's right. On the high platform, Elisha nodded and affirmed Noah's words. There are 2 rules for choosing partners. First, you can't choose an S-rank magic shooter as your partner. Second, you must be a magic shooter in the guild. Then where is the test venue? Gray raised his hand. Where is the test venue? Hearing this, Mira, who was holding the crystal ball in her hand, smiled. This year's test venue is Celestial Wolf Island. Celestial Wolf Island. Everyone suddenly became thoughtful. Celestial Wolf Island? Noah was a little surprised. According to Noah, our guild's first chairman seems to still exist on Celestial Wolf Island, Makarov said in a loud voice. Therefore, this time's test venue was chosen on Celestial Wolf Island to let the first chairman witness the growth of the new generation of fairy tale. Do you all understand? Yes. The magic shooters in the guild responded loudly. Perhaps it was precisely because they wanted to let the first chairman of Fairy Tale witness the growth of the new generation in the guild that the candidates for the S-rank magic shooter advancement test this time were the best in the guild in terms of battle prowess. Otherwise, a sorcerer like Levi, who had been working hard recently, should have been able to get 1 or 2 people selected because of her active activities. As for the specific test content, it will be announced after we depart for Celestial Wolf Island. Elisha suddenly smiled. One thing is certain, and that is, in front of you there is a checkpoint set by us S-rank magic shooters waiting for you to challenge. That's right. This sentence made all the candidates, except for Noah, break out in a cold sweat. Laxus looked at Noah with an imposing smile on his face. I'll be waiting for you on Celestial Wolf Island. Hearing Lax's words, Noah also smiled, not to be outdone. Anytime. At this point, the S-rank magic shooter advancement test officially began. Chapter 11:15. If it's me, of course it's hubby. Not long after the announcement of the S-rank magic shooter promotion exam, Nazi raised his head and puffed out his chest and shouted, "Besides hubby, who else is suitable to be my partner?" Love. Hubby was also full of fighting spirit and raised a hand. I will definitely make Nazi an S-rank magic shooter. Is it that easy? Lucy was not optimistic about Nazi. This time, Noah will be taking part in the S-rank magic shooter promotion exam. Yes. Wendy also expressed her own opinion, which was rare for her. Brother Noah is the best. He will definitely become an S-rank magic shooter. That's not necessarily true. Gray glanced at Noah and grinned. The content of the exam is not necessarily a battle. Even if it is a battle, we won't easily admit defeat. That's right. Elfman made a perfect posture to show his muscles. A real man shouldn't admit defeat before the battle even begins. Or rather, I will never lose. Nazi pointed to Noah, who was sitting innocently at the side, and made a declaration. Noah, just you wait. After that, Nazi no longer said anything and ran straight out of the door. Since you have decided, then don't waste time. Hurry up and practice. Love. Hubby flew out without any hesitation. Together with Nazi, they disappeared in the direction of the door in the blink of an eye. That idiot. Gray had a look of contempt on his face. There is not much time left before the S-rank magic shooter promotion exam. How much strength can he gain by practicing at this time? When the time comes, his body will be damaged and he will suffer. Well, that's Nazi's style. Noah smiled. If he is allowed to sit idle in the guild and at home, then his state may weaken. That's true. Lucy couldn't help but smile, and then she looked at Noah curiously. Then Noah, have you decided on your partner? Do you even need to ask? Gray asked as if he already knew the answer. Since the S-rank magic shooter promotion exam can't choose an active S-rank magic shooter as a partner without Mira, Noah's partner must be Lysana. Right? Ahaha. Wendy laughed in agreement. After all, she is his fiancée. However, when everyone thought that Noah's partner was Lysana, Noah shrugged. Unfortunately, you guessed it. My partner is not Lysana. Not Lysana? Wendy, Lucy, Gray, and the others were stunned. Obviously, no one thought of this possibility. What's wrong? Noah asked. Is it strange that I am not Lysana? That's right, Lysana, who was sitting next to Noah, also protested. It's not like I can only be brother Noah's partner, right? But isn't this too strange? Lucy said, not surprised. It's fine if it's Noah, but Lysana doesn't want to be Noah's partner? What do you mean it's fine if it's Noah? Lysana puffed up her cheeks and said with some dissatisfaction. Don't make it sound like I can't leave brother Noah, okay? Lysana, who said this, kept sticking to Noah's side, unwilling to leave. It was not persuasive at all. Then, Elfman added this sentence to expose Lysana's identity. Lysana originally wanted to be Noah's partner, but I, as a man, begged her for a long time before she reluctantly agreed to be my partner. Hearing this, the crowd finally understood. Brother Elfman. Lysanna glared at Elfman angrily. Why did you expose me? What do you mean by expose? Elfman said matter-of-factly. A man should be upright and honest. But I'm not a man. Lysanna almost went crazy. Seeing this, everyone smiled knowingly. Then they all reacted. Does this mean that Lysanna will be Elfman's partner? Lucy looked at Noah curiously. Then Noah, have you decided on your partner? Yes. Noah nodded and then looked at Wendy, who was sitting on the other side of him. He reached out and put his hand on her head. I've decided that Wendy will be my partner. This time, not only Lucy and Gray, but also Lysanna and Elfman were surprised. Me? Wendy herself couldn't help but be startled. When she finally reacted, her eyes widened in an instant, and she was at a loss for what to do. Obviously, she didn't expect Noah to choose her to be his partner. What's wrong? Noah blinked at Wendy. Wendy, are you not willing to be my partner? Of course not. Wendy answered without thinking. But after a while, she lowered her head and pointed at her fingers. But I'm not as good as everyone else. I can't help Brother Noah at all. That's where you're wrong, Wendy. Noah patted Wendy's head and said, You're a magic shooter of the Dragon Slayer. Even if your battle strength isn't guaranteed, your magic shooter of the Dragon Slayer is the real deal. It can provide support in all aspects, and I don't lack battle strength. With you helping me, I'll be more at ease. Really? Wendy's expression was like the sun after the rain, and she became excited. I understand. I'll do my best to help Brother Noah. Good girl. Noah rubbed Wendy's head dotingly, causing her to blush. But she didn't look unwilling at all. Instead, she looked like she was enjoying it. That's great. Lysanna looked on enviously. I also want to be in Brother Noah's team. Wait, Lysanna. Elfman immediately protested. You've already agreed to be my partner. A man has to keep his word. That's why I'm not a man. Lysanna felt weak all over. Oh, I shouldn't have agreed to it when I saw how pitiful it was that Brother Elfman couldn't find a partner. Hearing that, everyone laughed out loud. Seeing the happy smiles on his companions' faces, Noah smiled as well. His gaze, however, turned to the door and looked at the sky outside. Celestial Wolf Island? To Noah, Celestial Wolf Island wasn't just the holy land of fairy tale and the resting place of the first chairman. It was also a turning point in his life. It was on Celestial Wolf Island that Noah first encountered the world fragment and met the first chairman, Mavis. From then on, he embarked on his journey to various worlds. That was why Celestial Wolf Island was a very special place to Noah. However, when he thought of that island that was like a paradise, Noah didn't know why he felt uneasy. Lysanna, who noticed that something was wrong with Noah, asked curiously, Brother Noah, what's wrong? Lysanna's voice attracted everyone's attention to Noah. What's wrong? Gray deliberately teased. Don't tell me you're nervous? Nervous? Lucy seemed to be amused as she waved her hand. How could Noah be nervous? This time, the person most likely to pass the S-rank magic shooter promotion exam is Noah, right? Even a man will be nervous, Elfman said seriously. If he's nervous, then it proves that Noah is a man. What are you talking about? Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he shook his head. After hesitating for a while, he frankly told them what was on his mind. I don't know why, but I have a feeling that something will happen in this S-rank advancement test. Something is going to happen. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Aren't you thinking too much? Gray patted Noah's shoulder. Heavenly Wolf Island is our guild's holy land. Aside from our guild members, nobody else knows how to get to the island. Not to mention, you won't be the only one participating in this test. The guild leader Elusa and Mira will be there as well. Even Kildas and Raxas will be there. What could possibly happen? That's right, Wendy said softly. Brother Noah, don't worry. Is that so? Noah nodded casually. I hope so. The absent-minded Noah didn't notice that Kana, who was rarely not hugging a wine bottle or barrel, was looking at him with sparkling eyes. Chapter 11:16. The S-rank magic shooter advancement test would officially begin in a week's time. Before that, there was a whole week's time for the members selected for the S-rank magic shooter advancement test to prepare. This period of time should be used to determine the partners of the selected members. However, in less than a week's time, almost everyone's partners had already been decided. Noah and Wendy were in a group. Naz and Habe were in a group. Elfman and Lisanna were in a group. These three groups were the fastest to decide on their partners. After that, Noah found out who the other people had chosen as partners. First of all, Gadula's partner was Lili. For some reason, ever since Lili joined Fairy Tail, Gadulu and Lili had been hanging out together. They even teamed up when they worked, and it was as if they regretted not having met earlier. Therefore, this time, Gadulu did not hesitate to choose Lili as his partner. Lili also agreed without any hesitation and officially formed a team. After that, Julian chose Levi as his partner. According to his companions in the guild, ever since he came to Fairy Tail, Julian had been traumatized by Noah's beating. He had chosen to quietly stay in a corner of the guild and did not communicate with anyone. And the one who broke this state was Levi. Levi was the first person in Fairy Tail to strike up a conversation with Julian and become friends with him. Thus, under Levi's lead, Julian gradually began to integrate into the guild. Naturally, Julian chose Levi as his partner, and the kind-hearted Levi did not have any intention of refusing and directly agreed. In the end, Gray's partner was Freed. Due to Lox's confinement, Freed hadn't been very active in the guild recently. As a result, even though he possessed strength comparable to many of the people who had been selected for the S-rank Great Wizard Advancement Test, he hadn't been selected. However, even though he was not selected as a partner, Freed was definitely the best choice. Therefore, Gray specifically sought out Thor Castle and invited Freed to become his partner. Considering that Laxus would also be heading to Skywolf Island, Freed didn't reject Gray's invitation. At this point, apart from Kana, the partners of the other 6 candidates for the S-rank Magic Shooter Advancement Test had all been chosen. On the other hand, Elisha, Mira, Kildas, Laxus, and the other active S-rank Archmages went to Skywolf Island first to set up the venue for the S-rank Archmage Advancement Test. They even brought Bikesro, Alba, and Jurlin there, leaving only the president, Makarov, to wait for a week to pass before bringing the candidates to Skywolf Island. After all, there was a very secretive barrier set up around Celestial Wolf Island that could prevent any magic from detecting its existence. If he wanted to enter Skywolf Island, he could only do so on his feet and rely on his eyes. Therefore, apart from the higher-ups of Fairy Tail who already knew the location of Skywolf Island, the rest didn't know where it was. It was also very necessary for Makarov to stay behind to lead the way. Just as the entire guild was in a lively discussion about the S-rank Magic Shooter Advancement Test, Noah walked out of the guild's gate alone. Looking at the distant horizon, his mind became more and more restless. Sure enough, something big will definitely happen on this trip to Skywolf Island. After all, Noah's sixth sense was directly linked to some of the world's wills and hints. It couldn't be more accurate. Since it could make Noah so restless for no reason, then something big was definitely going to happen. Something that even Noah had no choice but to treat seriously. Thinking of this, Noah's pitch-black eyes couldn't help but flicker. What exactly is going to happen? Just as he finished speaking, a voice responded to Noah's words. Do you also think that something will happen on Skywolf Island? Hearing this voice, Noah was startled at first. Then he turned his head and looked behind him. What appeared in front of Noah's eyes was a figure that even Noah couldn't help but be surprised. Since you already know what will happen on this trip to Skywolf Island, why did you still bring Wendy along? Spreading out a pair of wings, Xiaolulu, who was flying in the air, asked Noah in an extremely angry manner. If that's the case, won't Wendy be involved in a very dangerous situation? Hearing this, Noah frowned slightly and looked straight at Xiaolulu. Do you know what will happen on Skywolf Island? I don't know. Xiaolulu bit her lip and said rather helplessly. I can only see some very scattered fragments, very bad fragments. Fragments? Noah asked doubtfully. What do you mean? The Queen of the Transcendence should have told you that she has some kind of ability to predict the future, right? Xiaolulu said. Although I don't know why, I seem to have this ability too. Xiaolulu's words made Noah's heart skip a beat. I don't know what will happen on Skywolf Island, but I can be sure that it won't be anything good. Xiaolulu's face was tense. Even if that's the case, do you still want to let Wendy go to such a dangerous place? Regardless of whether there is danger on Skywolf Island or not, it would be more reassuring to have Wendy by my side, right? Noah relaxed his furrowed brows and looked at Xia Lulu. Or if I don't bring Wendy by my side and let you accompany her, do you have a way to ensure that Wendy will be fine if something happens? Xia Lulu was instantly speechless. Since we've already confirmed that something will happen on Skywolf Island, then I have to make this trip. Noah glanced at Xia Lulu. If you don't feel at ease, then you can come with me. Then let's do this. Xia Lulu muttered to herself for a while and could only agree helplessly. When the time comes, I'll go with you. After saying this, Xia Lulu turned around and flew back into the guild. After watching Xia Lulu leave, Noah was just about to follow her back into the guild when another figure walked out. Noah stopped in his tracks. Kana. Noah's call did not attract Kana's attention. No. It should be said that from the beginning, Kana had been watching Noah and was walking towards Noah. It was obvious that she was coming for Noah. However, what made Noah stop in his tracks was not Kana's approach, but the expression on Kana's face. It was as if she was in a dilemma, as if she was about to say something difficult. It was a very complicated and struggling expression. Noah could not ignore this expression. Thus, Noah stopped in his tracks. Under such circumstances, Kana arrived in front of Noah, but her eyes did not dare to look in his direction. She lowered her head and spoke in a low voice. Noah! Noah! Kana! Noah looked straight at Kana. What's the matter? Kana tightened her arms and spoke with difficulty. Can I ask you for a favor? Go ahead. Noah nodded without hesitation. As long as I can do it, I'll definitely help you. These words made Kana's eyes become gloomy and uncertain. After a while, Kana finally raised her head and looked straight at Noah. Even if I ask you to give up on the S-Rank High Mage Advancement exam, will it still be the same? Give up on the S-Rank High Mage Advancement exam. Noah froze. I have to become an S-Rank High Mage. Kana bit her lips. But if you are here, I feel that I won't have a chance of winning. Thus, Kana could only ask Noah to give up on the S-Rank High Mage Advancement exam. Noah understood her meaning. The reason? Noah was silent for a while before speaking. What's the reason? Kana was silent. But Noah could feel the struggle in Kana's heart. After a while, Kana's body suddenly relaxed and she forced a smile. I'm sorry, forget what I just said. Leaving behind these words, Kana returned to the guild without looking back. Looking at Katana's back, Noah's eyebrows furrowed tightly. What was going on? Chapter 11:17. It would be a lie to say that Noah didn't care about Kana's abnormality. Although she wasn't as close as Alusha and Gray, Kana was Noah's childhood friend. They were partners that grew up together, so how could he not care about Kana's abnormality? Thus, after that, Noah always wanted to talk to Kana again. Who knew? Maybe Kana already knew about Noah's plans, but in the following week, she didn't show her face in the guild at all. Noah even went to Kana's place to look for her, but in the end, Kana didn't seem to be at home, so Noah could only give up helplessly. Later, Noah found out that Kana had actually been staying at Lucy's house for the past week. After that, he heard the news that Kana and Lucy had formed a team. With no other choice, Noah could only give up and plan to take one step at a time. After all, other than Kana's matter, Noah still had a lot of things to take care of. For example, after knowing that something big would definitely happen on Heavenly Wolf Island, Noah naturally had to do a lot of investigation and preparation. Another example was because almost all of the elites in Fairy Tail would leave the guild and head to Heavenly Wolf Island, causing Fairy Tail's defense to become unprecedentedly low. Noah also had to check Fairy Tail's defense system. In the past, in order to prevent Fairy Tail from being destroyed by others, Noah had carved many runes into the building materials when the guild was being rebuilt, forming an extremely complete rune magic defense system. This time, in order to be safe, Noah had spent a lot of money. He had spent all of the tens of millions that he had worked hard to earn to buy a large pile of magic crystals with the largest storage capacity. He gave them to Makao and Wakaba for them to use when necessary. With such a large amount of magic crystals, even if the Fairy Tail's defensive system remained active, it would still be able to last for nearly 10 years. This way, even if something really happened, as long as Fairy Tail's high mages hid in the guild, their safety would be guaranteed. After doing all this, Noah was more or less relieved. Actually, the best way was to propose to Makarov to cancel the S-rank high mage advancement test. But what was the reason for canceling it? Because Noah's intuition told him that something big was about to happen? Because of Xiao Lulu's incomplete foresight ability, she saw some incomplete fragments? Such a weak reason was definitely not enough for Makarov to cancel the guild's most important S-rank high mage advancement test. In addition, Noah believed that rather than cowering and deliberately hiding, it would solve the problem from the root. Thus, in the end, Noah didn't propose to cancel the S-rank high mage advancement test. Just like that, a week's time passed. On the boundless ocean, a ship was braving the wind and waves, sailing straight ahead. Walala! The sound of the waves was incessant. Oh, oh, oh! The cries of the seagulls seemed to have a rhythm that constantly reverberated in the air. The scorching sun sprinkled down from the horizon and shone on the slowly moving ship, causing the air to more or less distort. One could imagine how high the temperature was at this time. Because of the airflow, the temperature here was high all year round. Thus, if one wanted to go to Celestial Wolf Island, it was absolutely unavoidable that they would have to endure the high temperature here for a period of time. Because of this, on the entire deck, almost all of the candidates for the S-rank magic shooter promotion exam in Fairy Tail were wearing swimsuits, looking dispirited. "It's so hot," Lise Anna complained as she stuck a frozen drink bottle to her face. "Why is it still so hot here?" In the past, Lise Anna had come to Celestial Wolf Island with Noah once. At that time, Lise Anna was extremely uncomfortable with the temperature here, let alone this was only her second time here. If even Lise Anna was like this, there was no need to talk about the rest. They all seemed to be exhausted, lying down, sitting up, lying down and falling down. The scene was a mess. In such a high temperature, even Noah had taken off his shirt and was only wearing a pair of pants, causing Wendy and Rachel's cheeks to turn red. They frequently looked in Noah's direction, and couldn't be any more innocent. As for Lucy, she had long been unable to stand the sun. "Gray, can't you think of a way?" Lucy collapsed on the chair like a corpse, her skin covered in sweat. "Aren't you an ice magician? Are you an idiot?" Gray was also covered in sweat, lying on the chair as if he couldn't stand the heat, looking like he was about to die. There's still the most important test coming up. Who would use their precious mana in such a place? By the way, Gray had already taken off all his clothes and was lying there naked. If it were any other time, the ladies would have already made things difficult for him. But now, everyone was so hot that even their heads and vision were blurred. Not to mention that they didn't have the mood to care. Even if they wanted to, their blurred vision basically couldn't see Gray's naked body, which allowed Gray to escape the disaster. Fortunately, Naz was now lying on the side and couldn't move because of his sickness from the transportation. Otherwise, if he were to be sprayed with fire by this emotional guy, the temperature would be shocking. "Hey Noah, haven't you been to Celestial Wolf Island before?" Rachel leaned on the simple wooden table and said to Noah weakly. "How long until we reach Celestial Wolf Island?" "Don't worry," Noah said with a bitter smile. "We're almost there. Bear with it for a while." Hearing this, everyone could only put on a bitter face and continue to bear with the high temperature. Perhaps wanting to divert attention, Lucy asked Noah, "What kind of place is Celestial Wolf Island?" After hearing Lucy's words, the others also looked in Noah's direction. "What kind of place is it?" Noah pondered for a moment and then said so. "A very unbelievable place, right?" "Unbelievable?" Rachel, who was the most curious, asked. "How is it unbelievable?" Noah turned his head and looked at the endless sea in front of him. His voice echoed on the deck. "There, the earth contains an extremely large amount of mana. The air is also filled with magic elves that can quickly restore one's strength. And there is also a huge celestial wolf tree on the island that has unbelievable functions. So, if there must be a word to describe Celestial Wolf Island, it would be unbelievable." When he spoke up to hear, Noah paused for a moment before he spoke indifferently. "Moreover, there is a huge secret hidden on Celestial Wolf Island." This time, no one cared about the heat as they were all attracted by Noah's words. "I know about this too." Ruby raised her hand, her face filled with the desire to know. "It is said that ever since Celestial Wolf Island came into existence, the island has been hiding a huge secret related to the fairy tale." "Really?" Wendy tilted her head and smiled innocently. It would be great if we could know what the secret is. It would be great if it was that easy. Lisa smiled and waved her hand. Then she looked at Noah and asked without much hope. Brother Noah, who received 2 years of guidance from the first president on Celestial Wolf Island, shouldn't know about this secret, right? Hearing Lysana's words, Noah shrugged. I know. See. Lisa looked as if she had expected this. Brother Noah as expected. Before she could finish her sentence, Lysana's expression froze. Noah? Noah? Lucy asked doubtfully. What did you just say? Didn't you hear me clearly? Noah scratched his cheek. I said I know about that secret. When this sentence fell from Noah's mouth and was confirmed by everyone, the eyes of all the candidates for the S-Rank Magic Shooter promotion exam in Fairy Tale lit up. Chapter 11:18. What is it? At this time, Levi's attention was completely diverted, and she was no longer aware of the high temperature. She couldn't wait to ask Noah. What is the secret hidden on Celestial Wolf Island? It wasn't just Levi. In addition to the seasick Naz, even the curiosity of Lysana, Wendy, Lucy, Kana, Gray, Hubby, and Xiao Lulu was aroused by Noah. Gadjaloo, Julian, Freed, Elfman, and Lily, who had been sitting in the corner without saying anything, turned their gazes and looked straight in Noah's direction. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Noah remained silent for a while, as though he was considering what words he should use to describe the situation. After a while he said, you should all know about the 3 major spells of Fairy Tale, right? Including Wendy and Summer Lulu, who had just joined Fairy Tale not long ago. All the sorcerers present nodded in agreement. As long as they were Fairy Tale's archmages, they would definitely know about the 3 major spells of Fairy Tale. After all, it was a legend that everyone in the magic world knew. Even others knew about this matter clearly. As a member of Fairy Tale, it was even more impossible for them not to know. The 3 super spells that were developed by the first president are superior to all ordinary spells. Until now, our guild has only inherited one of them. Noah looked around at everyone. Using the divine light to suppress the darkness, it can target everything that the caster considers to be the enemy and mentally destroy the opponent's super judgment magic, Fairy Law. Once this super magic is activated, even if the opponent is an entire guild, it can instantly annihilate them. Everyone secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. No one doubted this matter. At least Naz, Gray, Lucy, Wendy, and the others who had seen the super reversal spell Nirvana, firmly believed in this matter. Since the effect of Nirvana could reach such a terrifying level, then it was normal for the Fairy Law, which was also a super spell, to have such a terrifying effect. Although the others had not seen Nirvana, they had witnessed the power and threat of the super subspace spell Anima with their own eyes. As a super spell, no one doubted the power of the Fairy Law. While everyone had such thoughts in their hearts, Noah said so. However, the Fairy Law is only a trial spell after all. Among the 3 major spells of Fairy Tale, there is also the Erase spell. In terms of lethality and destructive power, it is far above the Fairy Law. Erase. Erase spell? Lucy shrunk her neck a little timidly. It sounds very dangerous. Of course it's dangerous. Noah curled his lips and smiled. It can collect and condense the brilliance of the sun, moon, and stars, and turn it into a ruthless light that will not allow the enemy to survive. The super erase spell Fairy Glitter, that can destroy all enemies, can even collect the power of the stars. Do you think it's dangerous? Everyone secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva again. Super erase spell? Gray propped himself up and looked at Noah. It can't be comparable to the Council's magic elven power, can it? Everyone suddenly looked at each other in dismay. Magic elven power. Held by the Council, it could gather magic of multiple attributes together and launch it using a satellite magic array. The power was enough to destroy a country's super spacetime destruction spell. Because of its terrifying destructive power, this super spacetime destruction spell could even become a strategic weapon. It was extremely terrifying. If the super erase spell Fairy Glitter could reach that level, then it would be really terrifying. In this regard, Noah could only shake his head. No matter what, it can't reach the level of a strategic weapon. After all, Fairy Glitter is not a destructive spell, but an erase spell. It doesn't have that much destructive power. Of course, its lethality is definitely not weak. If you were hit by that spell, even if you don't die, you would be crippled for life. Hearing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief, but they were also secretly shocked. Even if its destructive power could not be compared to magic elven power, its lethality was still quite terrifying. Then what does the huge secret hidden in Celestial Wolf Island have to do with this super erase spell fairy glitter? Lucy hurriedly changed the topic and even joked. It can't be that such a terrifying spell is hidden on Celestial Wolf Island? Lucy's words made her companions around her smile knowingly. However, Noah looked at Lucy silently and did not say a word. Seeing this, everyone was silent. It can't be. Lucy's mouth twitched. That so-called secret, is it really the fairy glitter? You guessed right. Noah sighed and said seriously. The secret hidden on Celestial Wolf Island is the fairy glitter. That super erase spell is now hidden on Celestial Wolf Island. After receiving Noah's affirmation, everyone looked at each other in dismay. Why do we have to deal with such a terrifying spell again? Lucy almost cried. First it was the super reversal magic Nirvana. Then it was the super subspace magic Anima. Now it's such a terrifying super obliteration magic. Why have we been dealing with super magic that humans shouldn't possess recently? Just as Lucy finished speaking, an aged voice rang out. What is truly terrifying is not magic, but the human heart. Saying this, Makarov walked over from the other side of the deck. As long as you yearn for the light, then no matter how terrifying the magic is, it will become your wealth. President. Everyone stood up in unison. The reason why the first president, Mavis Viamilio, developed the three great spells was not to make them the object of fear in your hearts, but to illuminate the path ahead of you. Makarov's gaze swept across everyone. That's why there's no need to be afraid. No matter how frightening the ultimate erasure magic is, it will always erase the enemies that threaten you. It's precisely in order to protect the guild and its companions from all sorts of enemies that the first generation created the three great ultimate spells. I hope you won't forget this. Makarov's words were like a ray of light, sweeping away the darkness in everyone's hearts. Then Makarov changed the topic and pointed to the front. Look, we have arrived at our guild's holy land, Celestial Wolf Island. Hearing this, everyone turned their heads in unison and looked forward, only to see at the far end of the sea, a strange island slowly appeared in everyone's eyes. It was an island that seemed to be made up of two islands, one big and one small, stacked together, with a towering tree in the middle of the island. Is that Celestial Wolf Island? Everyone's gaze was attracted to the strange island. So powerful. Wendy took a sip of the air and sucked it into her mouth. Even from such a distance, I can still feel the powerful magic in the air. You will be conducting the first stage of the S-rank magic shooter advancement exam on that island, Makarov said. Do you see the smoking area on the island? After Makarov mentioned it, everyone noticed. In one of the corners of Celestial Wolf Island, a wisp of green smoke was slowly rising. You will need to go there first. There are 7 paths that have been set up. Each group can only choose one path to advance, Makarov explained. And the 7 paths are like this. Makarov pointed to the side. Wong. Accompanied by a trembling sound, a light screen gradually appeared beside Makarov. Chapter 11:19. What appeared on the light screen and in front of everyone present was a schematic diagram that looked like a map. An entrance was marked at the bottom of the schematic map. That entrance was probably the place where a wisp of green smoke was rising from on Celestial Wolf Island. The entrance was connected to 7 different passageways. Those 7 tunnels, if one walked to the end, would all lead to the exit. However, there was an extremely complicated structure in the middle of the 7 passages. There was a portrait of a person in the middle of each of the 4 passages. It was the portrait of Alusha, Mira, Kildas, and Laxus, the 4 active S-rank magic shooters. The remaining 3 passages converged in the middle to form a single passage. In other words, there were only 5 passages leading to the exit. Looking at this schematic map, Noah more or less understood how the first phase of the S-rank magic shooter advancement test would unfold. As you can see, 4 of the 7 passages leading to the end are already guarded by an active S-rank magic shooter. If you choose these 4 passages and encounter 4 S-rank magic shooters, you must defeat them or gain their recognition before you can proceed to the end smoothly. Under everyone's gaze, Makarov first pointed to the 4 passages with the portrait of the 4 S-rank magic shooters on the schematic map and explained. Then, he pointed to the other 3 passages that would eventually converge. And those who choose the other 3 passages that will eventually converge will meet on the way to the end. When you meet, that's when the experiment begins. I see. Gray seemed to understand a little. In other words, the teams that choose the 3 passages that will converge will have to engage in a free-for-all between the 3 groups, right? That's right. Makarov nodded. Only one group can pass through this passage. Therefore, no matter what method the 3 groups use, as long as they eliminate the other 2 groups, they can proceed to the end. As long as they can reach the end, they will be considered to have passed the first phase of the S-rank magic shooter advancement test. Makarov turned his gaze to the 7 groups on the deck. Only the teams that pass the first phase of the test can continue to participate in the later phases of the test, and finally pass the S-rank magic shooter advancement test to obtain the qualifications to be promoted to an S-rank magic shooter. Understand? That one sentence made the members of the 7 teams grumble incessantly. Do you understand? How could they not understand such a clear explanation? But it was precisely because they understood that they knew how difficult it was to pass the first phase of the S-rank magic shooter advancement test. Of the 7 groups, 4 of them would encounter an active S-rank archmage. Only by defeating or gaining the recognition of an active S-rank magic shooter could they pass the first phase of the test. Defeating an S-rank magic shooter? Even if it was a group of 2, it was easier said than done to be able to join forces. Not to mention, the 4 active S-rank magic shooters were almost all powerhouses that surpassed the scope of an ordinary S-rank magic shooter. Kildas and Laxas even had the ability to challenge Makarov, who was one of the top 10 saint magicians. Defeating them? Except for Noah, it could be said that there was almost no hope for the rest. As for the other 3 groups, even if they did not encounter an active S-rank magic shooter, the difficulty of passing would not be less than challenging an S-rank magic shooter due to the fierce competition. After all, it was a battle royale between 3 groups. Therefore, the difficulty of passing through the 7 passages was almost the same. Of course, if they chose a passage that was guarded by an active S-rank magic shooter, they did not necessarily have to defeat the other party. As long as they could gain the other party's recognition, they could still pass. Therefore, if they were lucky in the end, there would be nothing more than 4 groups of people who passed the recognition of the 4 S-rank magic shooters. In addition to the group that won in the battle royale, there would be a total of 5 groups that passed the first phase of the test. But if they were unlucky and the 4 S-rank magic shooters' passages were blocked, then it was possible that only one group would be left to pass the first phase of the test. In the end, if there is only one group left to pass the first phase of the test, then the S-rank magic shooter advancement test finalists of that group can directly pass the test. Makarov coughed dryly. In other words, the first phase of the test, in addition to testing your combat strength, also tests your luck. Combat strength and luck? Everyone nodded thoughtfully. Of course, more people fell into a deep sense of powerlessness. Is the so-called S-rank magic shooter advancement test so difficult? Lucy said to Kana somewhat helplessly. Let's not talk about the other 4 passages guarded by S-rank magic shooters. Even if we choose the other 3 passages, if we encounter Noah, we won't have any chance of winning, right? Don't say such discouraging words, Lucy. Kana's smile seemed somewhat forced. Didn't the president say so? In addition to combat strength, luck is also tested, right? There must be a way, right? There must be. You really have no ambition, Gadjalu said somewhat unyieldingly. No matter who we encounter, as long as I join forces with Lili, we will definitely pass. Humph. Lili crossed his arms and smiled slightly. Let me see how powerful the S-rank magic shooters of this guild are. Julian only hopes that we don't encounter Sir Noah. Julian almost cried. Otherwise, Zhubian should just give up. Don't give up so easily, Julian, Rebbe said, cheering him on. Even if we encounter Noah, there will definitely be a way. Fighting against an active S-rank archmage? Gray glanced at the channel marked with the avatars of 4 S-rank archmages and glanced at Fried. If we encounter Laxas, you can't go easy on him. Of course. Fried's expression didn't change at all. Let Laxas witness my growth. That way won't Laxas be happy? A man. Elfman shouted. a large drop of cold sweat dripping down his forehead. A man is a man with good luck. I don't understand the meaning of this sentence. Lisanna sighed and then became happy. Elfman's face lit up and she said, "It seems that the person who will pass this year's S-rank magic shooter advancement test is most likely Big Brother Noah." Yes, yes. Wendy nodded and said happily to Noah, "If it's Big Brother Noah, even if he encounters an active S-rank magic shooter, he definitely won't lose." Hearing that, Noah smiled and looked in the direction of Celestial Wolf Island, his eyes burning with fighting spirit. Seeing that, Makarov suddenly revealed a strange smile. Then the first phase of the S-rank magic shooter advancement test begins now. Begin now. Everyone was stunned. Now, weren't they still at sea? While everyone else was still in a daze, Noah laughed bitterly. So that's how it is. Is that so? As soon as he finished speaking, Noah suddenly turned around and hugged Wendy, who was at a loss. A pair of wings suddenly spread out from the boots on his feet. Immediately after, Noah's figure turned into a streak of light and flew in the direction of Celestial Wolf Island. Seeing this scene, the crowd finally reacted, their faces turning green and white at the same time. Stop right there. The entire deck was in a mess. Under the effect of Hermes' boots, Noah flew in the direction of Celestial Wolf Island like a streak of light and landed in a smoking area. At this moment, the 7 paths were completely presented in front of Noah. "Wendy." Noah put down Wendy in his arms and asked, "Can you smell which path the 4 S-rank magic shooters are in?" Hearing that, Wendy twitched the tip of her nose and shook her head. "No, there are many strange smells mixed in the air. I can't even tell which smell belongs to Miss Alusha and Miss Mira." Sure enough, it's not that easy. Noah nodded without the slightest surprise. He glanced around the 7 tunnels and in the next second, he fixed his gaze on one of them. "Since I can't play any tricks, I'll just have to rely on luck." "Yes." Wendy nodded heavily and clenched her small fists, looking very cute. "If it's Big Brother Noah, no matter who he encounters, he won't lose." Noah rubbed Wendy's small head and then led her into one of the paths. Chapter 11:20. In the dim passageway, specks of fluorescent light fluttered back and forth in the air like fireflies, illuminating some of the space. It looked somewhat beautiful. Wow! Walking in such a passageway, Wendy couldn't help but exclaim. Her small hand seemed to want to catch those fireflies, but she also seemed to be a little scared. Her big watery eyes flickered with a beautiful expression. "It's so beautiful here." During this important period of the S-rank magic shooter advancement exam, Wendy's performance of looking around was very relaxed. It made people think that Wendy actually didn't come here to train, but rather to travel. She was quite leisurely. If it were someone else, they might have reminded Wendy. However, Noah didn't stop Wendy and let her wander there happily. In any case, Noah and Wendy, one had a superb perception ability, while the other had an extremely powerful sense of smell. If someone intended to attack them, it would be impossible not to be discovered. In addition, Noah was skilled and daring, so he didn't dampen Wendy's spirits. While looking around and observing the terrain, Noah asked casually, "Oh right, why didn't Xiao Lulu come along?" "Xiao Lulu isn't our partner. Although the president agreed to let her come to Celestial Wolf Island, he forbade Xiao Lulu from following me." Wendy answered cleverly. "The president should be worried that Xiao Lulu will help me." In other words, Xiao Lulu is now with Grandpa. Noah nodded in understanding. "In that case, we don't have to worry about any accidents." However, for this S-rank magic shooter advancement exam, I heard that not only the 4 active S-rank magic shooters came to the island first, but also Brother Noah's brother's 2 personal guards. Wendy tilted her head. "Will Xiao Lulu be with them?" "It's possible." Noah curled his lips. Bikesrow and Alba Jurlin should have set up a simple camp somewhere on Celestial Wolf Island. Xiao Lulu is very likely to have gone there. "Is that so?" Wendy said somewhat worriedly. "I hope Xiao Lulu can get along well with the 2 from Thor clan." In the midst of a rather leisurely conversation, Noah and Wendy walked along the passageway together. According to the current atmosphere, Noah and Wendy would continue to be leisurely until they encountered the enemy. Unfortunately, this leisurely atmosphere was soon replaced by another kind of atmosphere. It was a very heavy and depressing atmosphere. Noah and Wendy subconsciously slowed down their footsteps and turned their gazes to the front of the tunnel at the same time. The heavy and oppressive atmosphere was coming from the front. Big Brother Noah. Wendy's small face was tense, and some nervousness appeared in her eyes. There's the smell of someone up ahead. I guess so, Noah said indifferently. It seems that we have chosen a channel guarded by an active S-rank sorcerer. Noah and Wendy were the first to arrive at Celestial Wolf Island among the 7 groups of candidates, and they were the first to choose the channel. If they had chosen a channel where 3 groups of candidates would engage in a chaotic battle, then as the first group to choose the channel, Noah and Wendy would have to wait for the other 2 groups to arrive. However, at this moment, there was already someone waiting at the front of the passageway. What did this mean? It meant that the other party had arrived at Celestial Wolf Island before the other 7 groups. Other than the S-rank sorcerer who had set off early, who else could it be? In fact, Noah had guessed correctly. As Noah and Wendy moved forward, the channel in front of them gradually opened up. Not long after, a rather vast open space appeared in front of the 2 of them. The 2 of them stopped at the same time. This was because in the middle of the vast open space, a figure slowly raised his head under the illumination of the fluorescent light, revealing his full appearance. When the 3 pairs of eyes met, the expressions of the 3 people present were different. Wendy revealed a surprised expression. A helpless expression appeared on Noah's face. The other party revealed an unbridled expression. His expression was as if everything was going according to his wishes, faintly revealing a hint of joy. Yo, I've been waiting for you for a long time. When he heard this voice that was as violent as before, but not as violent as before, Noah's expression became even more helpless. I didn't expect that I would encounter a situation where I have to fight with you in the exam, Laxus. Yes. Standing in the middle of the vast open space, the S-rank sorcerer blocking Noah's path was Laxus. After a few months, the 2 brothers confronted each other again. However, the situation was very different. Last time, Noah and Laxus fought to settle all their past grievances. This time, Noah and Laxus fought for the S-rank sorcerer advancement exam. Or rather, this situation is exactly what I'm happy to see. Laxus grinned and pulled off his coat. Since you've met me, then you should know that I won't recognize you just because your performance is good, and obediently make way for you, right? I think so too. Noah slowly stepped forward and stood in front of Laxus, looking straight at his sworn brother. If you want to pass through here, I guess there's only one way. That's right. Laxus faced Noah's direction, turning sideways and raising his hand. His eyes became sharp. If you want to move forward, you'll have to defeat me. The moment his words fell, a violent electric current burst out from Laxus's body. Beep beep beep. The sound of the fierce electric current continued to resound in the sealed space. At this moment, a burst of astonishing mana slowly rose from Laxus's body, which was surrounded by violent electric currents. Feeling that extraordinary mana, Wendy couldn't help but take a step back, her pretty face slightly changing. This mana, obviously, Wendy felt that the mana on Laxus's body was of the same origin as that of a Dragon Slayer Archmage. Is he also a Dragon Slayer Archmage? Ignoring Wendy's surprise, Laxus slowly clenched his fist, which was flickering with electric light, in Noah's direction as if he had caught lightning. I heard that you seem to have formed a contract with an elf, and you're no longer afraid of magic, right? Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows. You already know? That guy Freed told me without permission. He said that everyone in the guild knew, Laxus said extremely calmly. But I'm doubtful. Is there really no magic that is ineffective against you? In front of Noah, Laxus walked step by step towards Noah's direction. For example, I don't believe that my Dragon Slayer magic is ineffective against you. As soon as his voice fell, bang! Accompanied by a loud stomping sound, Laxus, who was wrapped in lightning, suddenly swept across the space, as if he had turned into a real lightning bolt, and scuttled in front of Noah. In the next moment, a fist that was filled with lightning and electric light burst out with an extremely terrifying momentum. Amidst the sound of lightning that made one's scalp numb, it exploded out. Bang! As if a bolt of lightning directly hit Noah's position, a burst of bright lightning exploded in Noah's position, covering Noah's entire body. Brother Noah! Wendy exclaimed aloud. However, Wendy's exclamation was completely covered by the intense electric shock sound. And at the place where the thick lightning was rioting, a figure emitting light smoke suddenly retreated from it. After the tip of his foot touched the ground a few times, he finally stabilized himself. Seeing that figure, Wendy breathed a sigh of relief. Noah, however, frowned and raised one hand. That hand, as if it had been roasted, emitted a thick burnt smell. It was unknown whether or not he saw this scene, but Laxus's voice reverberated from the center of the rioting lightning. Didn't this work? Saying such a sentence, Laxus, whose body was rippling with electricity, appeared from the lightning, the corner of his mouth slightly raised in a happy arc. Sure enough, the Dragon Slayer magic is effective against you. Laxus's magic was indeed effective against Noah. Noah's curse resistance was ineffective in front of the Dragon Slayer magic. Chapter 11:21. What was Dragon Slayer magic? Transforming a person's physique into a dragon's physique, allowing the user to have the same physique as a dragon, increasing strength, increasing attack and defense, and even adding attribute attacks. It was a magic that allowed the user to recover by swallowing substances of the same attribute. That was the Dragon Slayer magic. In other words, the true target of the so-called Dragon Slayer magic was not other people, but the Dragon Slayer Archmage who used the Dragon Slayer magic. If it was a pure attribute attack like Thunder Dragon's Roar, then it would be fine. But if it was a type of physical attack like Thunder Dragon's Crushing Fist, then it would be effective. Laxus, whose whole body was flickering with electricity, looked straight at Noah and smiled confidently. Am I right? Just as Laxus said, the Dragon Slayer magic possessed by Dragon Slayer Archmages was indeed a rare type of magic that could directly affect Noah's body, which was resistant to curses. Because it was a magic that allowed the user to have the physique of a dragon, and not a magic that directly affected Noah's body. In this way, although the so-called Dragon Slayer magic was still a magic, its attack method was in the form of physical attacks. It was not difficult to understand why it could affect Noah. As long as the magic is effective on you, then it's fine. The electricity on Laxus's body became even more violent. As long as it's effective, then I can continue to fight. After saying that, Laxus took a step forward. The violent magic in the form of lightning surged out from his body like a tide, turning into an electric current that formed around his body, causing the dust on the ground to fly. Be careful, Brother Noah. Wendy somewhat worriedly reminded. Noah nodded without turning his head, but his body did not move at all. At this moment, his pitch-black eyes became flickering. Beep beep beep. In the next moment, lightning suddenly flashed. Laxus, who was surrounded by violent lightning, disappeared from where he was. He turned into a bolt of lightning and shot towards Noah. Almost at the same time, Noah's body suddenly took a step to the left without warning. Swish! As Noah's body moved, a fist wrapped in dense lightning brushed past Noah's side and landed in the air. Laxus's expression didn't change at all when his punch missed. His body once again turned into a bolt of lightning and swept towards Noah. Laxus's speed was extremely fast. Even if it did not reach the true speed of lightning, under the support of magic, its speed was indeed not something that could be followed by the naked eye. Could be said to be terrifying. If it were other candidates, they would have been defeated in an instant by Laxus's lightning-like speed. However, in the face of such extreme speed, Noah only lifted one foot and slightly landed on the ground. His body was like a fallen leaf in a storm, lightly floating away. A bolt of lightning rubbed against the air, and in the sharp sound of breaking through the air, it violently shot out. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning and a black shadow, one in front and one behind, chased each other in the vast open space. In terms of speed, even with the LV. For agility blessing, Noah could not beat Laxus, who used the lightning transformation magic. However, in addition to the LV, for agility blessing, Noah also had the LV. For dexterity blessing. In addition, the open space was covered by Noah's sensing ability. Any movement in the wind would be detected by Noah. Even if his speed was not as fast as Laxus, Noah could rely on his flexible body to deal with Laxus, who turned into a bolt of lightning. Thus, in Wendy's eyes, a bolt of lightning constantly shot past Noah. Every time it fell in the air, it would suddenly turn, draw an arc, and continue to shoot in the direction of Noah. Noah, on the other hand, seemed to be able to see through all the trajectories of the lightning bolts. Every time the violent lightning bolts shot over, he would be able to dodge them with great agility and avoid them with great agility. Over time, every time Noah's attack was avoided by a hair's breadth, Laxus's complexion also gradually became dignified. His speed also became faster and faster, as if his magic power was free, crazily output. As the confrontation became more and more intense, Laxus's speed also became more and more terrifying. In the end, even Wendy could not see Laxus's figure. She could only feel a bolt of lightning frequently flying back and forth in the space. The speed was extremely fast. Even so, Noah's expression was still as calm as ever. Occasionally he would take a step forward, move back, tilt to the side and turn. Every time he made a slight movement, he would be able to brush past the lightning bolts that were shooting towards him, dodging Laxus's attack. Gradually, Laxus's mood also began to become impetuous. Indeed, Laxus saw the weakness of Noah's physique. He did not use the pure attribute attack of the Thunder Dragon's roar, but had been using the strengthening Dragon Slayer magic to fight with Noah. However, since he could not use his attribute attack, that meant that Laxus also had no way to attack Noah from a distance, and could only engage in close combat. And Noah did not completely rely on his physique to fight. Even if the curse resistance was gone, Noah's strength was still there, and did not weaken in the slightest. Originally, Noah's strength was stronger than Laxus's. Now, Laxus's attack methods were limited, so it was natural that he could not do anything to Noah. If this continued, when Noah found an opportunity to counterattack, Laxus would definitely lose. Understanding this point, Laxus decisively squandered all his magic power. Beep beep beep. The unprecedentedly violent thunder and lightning soared up from Laxus's body, crazily rising, causing the hard ground to crack along the way, revealing the layer of soil underneath. Hiya! Laxus suddenly shouted, his body shook and his speed soared. In an instant he flashed in front of Noah, facing Noah head-on. Dragon Slayer mystery. Laxus raised a fist, and the violent lightning all over his body gathered in it, causing the fist to look as if it had been struck by a bolt of lightning. Suddenly, an extremely large bolt of lightning swelled up. Thunder controlling thunder. Catching the huge thunderbolt that seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth, Laxus clenched his fist so tightly that blue veins popped out on his arm. His face was extremely ferocious, and he mercilessly blasted in the direction of Noah, like the thunder god descending from the sky. Wherever the fist that caught the huge thunderbolt passed, the air was compressed into a chaotic flow, spreading out in all directions. The earth-shattering punch made Noah's hair flutter, revealing a pair of deep dark eyes. Noah naturally knew that if he continued to fight, he would definitely be the one to win in the end. Noah also knew that Laxus could not possibly not understand this point. However, Noah did not expect that Laxus would actually be so decisive in making the last gamble. This was a blow that gathered all of Laxus's magic power. After using it, regardless of winning or losing, Laxus would not be able to continue fighting. Therefore, this was Laxus's last blow. In the face of this blow, Noah suddenly stopped, the corner of his mouth lifted, and his eyes that were illuminated by the terrifying thunderbolt burst out with unprecedented vigor. Buzz! At the next moment, Noah clenched one of his hands tightly, and his entire arm suddenly shook. Lines that looked like electric wires crawled on his arm. Impressively, it was the enhanced magic. With the blessing of LV. For ability value, coupled with the strengthening of enhanced magic, to what extent would Noah's physical ability be strong? The answer was soon revealed. Bang! Like a bullet from the chamber, Noah rushed out, and faced the terrifying thunderbolt head-on. Annihilating blow. The vigorous vortex of air suddenly condensed on Noah's fist, covering Noah's fist. Then, under the dull sound of the explosion and Wendy's somewhat frightened gaze, the two fists that carried the vortex of air and the terrifying thunderbolt heavily collided with each other. Bang! An earth-shattering roar burst out in the bottomless passage. Chapter 11:22. Bang! When the depressing roar that made one's heart contract and eardrums tremble reverberated from one of the passageways of Heavenly Wolf Island, the entire ground of Heavenly Wolf Island trembled for a brief moment. Within the passageway, in the vast open space above, a powerful impact mixed with violent lightning swept across the entire space like a storm spreading in all directions. Kacha! Kacha kacha kacha! Without any suspense, the ground cracked open again and again. Bang 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 bang. Under the attack of the substantial impact storm and terrifying lightning, the rocks that were closer to the impact site exploded one after another like fragile rubber balls. Even Wendy could not help but scream. She raised her hand to block in front of her. It was as if she was going against the flow in a storm and would be blown away at any time. If it was not for the fact that she was some distance away from the center of the impact, her petite figure would have been blown away. In such a situation, the entire open space at the center of the impact seemed to have collapsed and caved in extremely cleanly. As a result, the entire ground began to tremble crazily. Bolts of lightning were like pythons as they slithered back and forth on the ground. Wherever they passed, the ground would crack open. Not long after, along the center of the impact, the entire ground was covered with cracks and electric currents that moved back and forth like a spider web. By the time everything calmed down, it was unknown how much time had passed before it happened. Feeling that the movement had gradually calmed down, Wendy raised her head with lingering fear and looked forward. Pa! 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 Gravel rolled back and forth on the ground that was full of cracks and electric currents, making crisp sounds. A burst of thick sand and dust filled the space. In the thick sand and dust, two figures stood facing each other from afar. One of them was still standing tall and straight, his robe fluttering under the impact of the impact waves. He was not injured at all. The other was slightly bent over, his face covered with sweat, and he was constantly gasping for breath. One of his hands hung down weakly, and he seemed to be in a sorry state. The former was Noah. The latter was naturally Lax's. One of them had an expression as calm as an ancient well, and his posture was as calm as the wind and clouds, as if everything was normal. One of them was sweating profusely and panting heavily, cutting a sorry figure. It was clear at a glance who was strong and who was weak. However, Wendy noticed it. Although Noah was unscathed, one of his sleeves seemed to have been burned away, and his entire body was gone. Lax's limp hand trembled. Drops of blood dripped from the tip of his fist, dyeing a small piece of the ground red. Noah's missing hand and Lax's trembling and bleeding hand were both the hands that had launched the attack in the previous shocking collision. Clearly, the final result was still Noah's victory. "You've really grown into a monster." Staring at Noah in front of him, Lax's seemed to have given up on something. He relaxed his body and smiled weakly. "You didn't even use magic to block my strongest attack, and you didn't even get hurt? That's not right, Lax's." Noah shook his head. "At the last moment I used magic to strengthen my body. Otherwise the result wouldn't be like this." "Is that so?" Only then did Raxus's expression soften. He calmed his breathing and turned his gaze to Noah. "But, in the battle just now you didn't use your full strength, right?" Noah was silent. This was equivalent to admitting it. "Really?" Laxus closed his eyes and smacked his lips. Losing to a younger brother. There's nothing more embarrassing than this. After saying this, Laxus turned around and picked up the coat that he threw on the ground. After putting it on, he slowly left. This action was undoubtedly Laxus admitting his defeat. In fact, although Laxus could continue to stand there, his magical power was almost depleted. Even if they continued to fight, the outcome of the battle would only be decided in a short moment, right? Since that was the case, he might as well just admit defeat. This was the current Laxus. If it was the previous Laxus, he definitely wouldn't be so straightforward. This man who was full of obsession could finally be so magnanimous like today. Looking at Laxus's back gradually moving away, Noah couldn't help but speak. "Are you planning to go back?" Rax's footsteps paused slightly. Then, he returned to his original state as if nothing had happened. With his back facing Noah, he raised a hand. "I'll see you in the end." After finishing his words, Laxus disappeared at the end of the tunnel. Watching Laxus leave, Noah's face couldn't help but reveal a smile. "You've already lost, yet you're still acting cool. You're really not honest." "Big brother Noah." Wendy ran towards Noah's direction, and when she ran to Noah, she was so excited that she started dancing. "Big brother Noah. You passed." "Yes." Noah patted Wendy's head. "Wendy also stayed here and watched until the end. You're really amazing." No such thing." Wendy was a little embarrassed. "I didn't help at all." Facing that Laxus, there aren't many people who can say that they can help. Noah chuckled. Sooner or later, Wendy will become stronger. Wendy nodded heavily, and in her heart, she gradually began to think about becoming stronger. At this moment, the entire ground suddenly trembled for no reason. Wendy exclaimed in surprise. What's wrong? Noah frowned and looked in a direction. As far as Noah's eyes could see, he could only see the walls of the tunnel. However, Noah sensed an extremely shocking mana rising in that direction. This magic power. After feeling the aura of the magic power, Noah exclaimed in surprise. Kildas? Kildas? Wendy looked at Noah with some surprise. Does that mana belong to Kildas? It can't be wrong. Noah nodded affirmatively and thought about it. Seems that Kildas is a bit serious. Who on earth chose the route that Kildas was guarding? Ahaha. Wendy laughed dryly. Such amazing mana, I wonder who is unfortunate enough to face it. Noah nodded in agreement. Judging from Kildas' current level of magic power, even Rax's full power was not comparable to that of Kildas, right? As expected of Fairy Tale, the strongest sorcerer on the surface. At least, in Noah's opinion, Kildas had really surpassed Makarov in all aspects. I hope that the guy who made Kildas serious can successfully get Kildas' approval. That was Noah's current thought. As for defeating Kildas, forget it. In the face of absolute power, no matter what method one used, it was unlikely that it would be effective. To those guild members who had not reached the level of an S-rank magic shooter, Kildas' strength was an absolutely insurmountable wall. Therefore, no matter what strategy one used, it was unlikely to work. The only way to pass through the path that Kildas was guarding was to get Kildas' approval. If one were to defeat Kildas, even Alusha, Mira, and Laxus would not have a chance of winning, let alone the rest of the guild members except for Noah. It would be interesting if I could go all out against Kildas. After leaving this thought, Noah looked at Wendy. Okay, Wendy, let's continue forward. Yes. Wendy replied obediently. After that, Noah and Wendy continued forward and left the scene that had become extremely messy. After walking in the passage for about 5 minutes, there was light in front of them, which told Noah and Wendy that they had reached the exit. When Noah and Wendy walked out of the passage, a giggling voice sounded. I knew that Big Brother Noah would be able to pass. Hearing this extremely familiar voice, Noah suddenly smiled. He raised his head and looked forward. He saw that there were already a few groups outside the exit. The one who spoke was Lisanna. Chapter 11:23. When Noah walked out of the passage, there were already 3 teams present. Elfman and Lisanna's team, Julian and Leby's team, and Karna and Lucy's team. All 3 groups smiled at Noah, who had just walked out of the passage. Sure enough, it's impossible for Noah to fail. Lucy said to Noah with a smile. I thought Noah met Miss Mira and deliberately admitted defeat. Yo Noah. Leby also waved at Noah with a smile on her face. We also passed. You're a man. Elfman gave Noah a thumbs up. Men should pass the first stage of the experiment. As for Julian and Karna, although they didn't greet Noah, it was obvious that they were very happy about passing the first stage of the experiment. The joy on their faces couldn't be hidden. Everyone. Wendy said in surprise. Has everyone passed? Not to mention Wendy, even Noah was more or less surprised. Regardless of which team won the final victory, among the 3 teams that passed the first stage of the experiment, 2 of them must have met an active S-rank archmage. And since they were already here, it meant that 2 of the 3 teams had broken through the obstacles of the S-rank magic shooters to pass the first stage of the experiment. Which 2 teams had the ability to break through the S-rank archmage's garrison? Noah, who was extremely curious, asked directly. What kind of passage did you choose? What kind of opponents did you meet? Hearing this, the team members who passed the first stage looked at each other and smiled. Then the next report made Noah surprised again. We chose the passage of the chaotic battle. Lucy made a victory gesture to Noah. Along with us are Gadjaloo and Lily's teams, as well as Gray and Freed's teams. Wendy couldn't help but cover her mouth. In other words, Sister Lucy and Sister Kana had to defeat those 2 teams to clear the level? Rather than saying that we defeated them, it's better to say that we picked up a bargain. Karna laughed bitterly. Because we were the last to arrive at Celestial Wolf Island, the other passages had already been chosen. When we walked into the only remaining passage and arrived at the chaotic battlefield, the impatient Gray and Gadjaloo started fighting first. In the end, Gray, Gadjaloo, Freed, and Lily were all beaten black and blue, and even their mana was exhausted. Lucy laughed dryly. So, we picked up a little bargain. I see. Noah laughed and then looked at Lysana and Elfman. Then, you met an active S-rank Archmage's garrison? It's not just an active S-rank Archmage, Karna said helplessly. We're met Sister Mira. Mira. Noah was slightly stunned, and then he was surprised. In other words, you defeated Mira before coming here? Looking at Noah's surprised expression, Lysana and Elfman exchanged glances. Back to 30 minutes ago. When Noah flew directly to Celestial Wolf Island with Wendy and chose a path, the others also arrived at Celestial Wolf Island one after another after a commotion and began to choose a path. In addition to Noah and Wendy, Naz and Gadjaloo, who teamed up with Habby and Lily respectively, also took advantage of the convenience of moving and arrived at Celestial Wolf Island first. After Naz and Gadjaloo's teams, Julian and Lebby's teams, and Gray and Freed's teams also landed on the island respectively. Lysana and Elfman arrived at Celestial Wolf Island one step ahead of Lucy and Karna, and chose one of the two remaining routes. However, the enemies waiting in front of the siblings made Lysana and Elfman experience what it meant to be shocked. Whoosh! A ferocious scaled tail that looked like a crocodile swayed in the air with a whistling sound. I didn't expect that the ones who chose the route I was stationed to be the two of you, Lysana, Elfman. The owner of the ferocious scaled tail let out a clear and melodious voice as usual. That voice was already very familiar to Lysana and Elfman. But it was precisely because of this familiarity that Lysana and Elfman could tell that this voice was different from before. What was the difference? The difference was that this voice, which had always been sweet and gentle in the past, now carried the ferocious aura of a ferocious beast. Under this ferocious voice, even Lysana and Elfman couldn't help but take a step back. Almost at the same time, the voice filled with ferocious aura sounded again. You can't back off here. Otherwise, I won't let you, who can't even get past me, continue forward. Along with this sentence, the owner of the ferocious scaled tail took a step forward and exposed her entire body to the sunlight. What kind of figure was that? If one had to use a word to describe it, then there was only one word. Nightmare. Her slim and graceful body was covered only by a tight-fitting swimsuit. Her waist-length hair, which used to hang down like silver silk, shot up into the sky in anger. Her pair of arms had turned into the fins of a demon's wrist. Myra's gentle and delicate face was not only filled with ferociousness at this moment, but her ears were also long and pulled back like a bat's. Coupled with the ferocious scaled tail that swayed up and down on her back, how could such an appearance not be described as a nightmare? And to the enemy, Myra's appearance was indeed a nightmare. That was because it was the power of the devil that Mira had absorbed through her self-awakening, receive magic, since she was young. It was called Satan's soul. It was only in this form that Mira was in existence like in the legends. Mira Jean Strauss was a demonkin that was on par with the fairy queen. Even if you're my younger brother or sister, I won't show any mercy. As she slowly walked forward, Mira, who had received Satan's soul and transformed into a demonkin, looked at Lysana and Elfman with a pair of sharp eyes. Her voice was so low that it sounded like it came from the depths of hell. So use all your strength. At this moment, a pitch-black aura of death rose from Myra's body like a fog, causing the air to seem as though it had decayed and become lifeless. Lysana and Elfman felt suffocated at the same time. That was because both Lysana and Elfman were able to tell. Mira was definitely serious. Sister. Elfman clenched his fists and stared at Mira, sweat dripping from his forehead. It was obvious that Elfman couldn't muster up the will to resist. Lysana, on the other hand, took a deep breath and suddenly took a step forward. Her action caused Myra's footsteps to falter slightly. She looked over and the corner of her mouth lifted. Lysana, do you really think you can defeat me? In her Satan's soul form, Myra's smile was hair-raising. However, in the face of Myra's terrifying smile, Lysana smiled sweetly and spoke without hesitation. That's right, Sister Mira. I will defeat you. Oh. Mira smiled disdainfully. Do you think you can do it? If it's my own strength, I naturally won't be able to do it. Lisa smiled confidently. But Sister Mira, it's a pity that I have a fiancé who really dotes on me. Mila raised her eyebrows slightly at his words. Ah, Sister Mira, don't you know? Lisa blinked at Mira. In order to not let me be in danger, Big Brother Noah helped me make a lot of insurance. Sister Mira doesn't seem to know about this. It seems that Big Brother Noah really does love me more. The smile on Mira's face became twitching. What happened next was logical. Mira, who had been guarding against Lysana's unknown methods and neglected Elfman, was hit by this man's anger and carelessly lost. Chapter 11:24. After learning about how Lysana and Elfman defeated Mira, Noah was completely speechless. He didn't think that Lysana would be so good at taking advantage of loopholes. Although Mira no longer continued to be active in the magic world as a magic shooter recently and lived a rather comfortable life, even if her skills were rusty because of this, the foundation of an S-rank magic shooter was still there, after all, and would not disappear just like that. With Lysana and Elfman's strength, even if they worked together, it would be difficult for them to deal an effective blow to Mira, let alone defeat her. The problem was that Lysana had used Noah's matter to sway Mira. With Noah's position in Myra's heart, as well as Noah's fiancée Lysana's provocation, the real reason for Myra's defeat was probably not the means that Noah had secretly prepared for Lysana, but also the lethality of Brother Noah loves me more. After all, they were both Noah's fiancés. Noah had made a lot of preparations so that Lysana wouldn't be in danger. On the other hand, not only was Mira not prepared at all, she didn't even know about this matter. With such a difference in treatment, it was already very good that Mira didn't cry. It was inevitable that she would be shaken. Her skills were rusty because she hadn't fought in a long time. She was too guarded against Lysana's unknown means and neglected Elfman's role. Her heart was shaken. These three reasons combined caused Mira, an active S-rank sorcerer, to reveal too many flaws and be taken down by Lysana and Elfman. Of course, there was another reason. That was, Myra's Satan's soul wasn't a power that could be used as and when she wanted to. The so-called receiving magic was actually a magic that could absorb the power of animals, monsters, and even magical creatures into one's own body for one's own use. In the magic world, there were many sorcerers who knew how to use receive spell. Even Lysana and Elfman knew how to use receive spell. It was easy to imagine how versatile this spell was. However, apart from Mira, no one could receive the power of a demon. Naturally, this kind of power wasn't something that could be used as and when one wanted to. One weakness that couldn't be bypassed was that the mana consumption was too great. In that case, it was bound to lead to a problem. Myra's explosive power was very strong, even stronger than Alush's and comparable to Laxus's. However, she couldn't last long in battle. Once he was dragged into a war of attrition, it would undoubtedly be the worst for Mira. In the end, after being intimidated by Lysana and then provoked, Mira, who had grown fearful and shaken, was firmly held back by Lysana. Then, Elfman seized the opportunity and took down Mira in one fell swoop. This was the reason why Mira lost. Not only Noah but even the rest of the people could more or less see the reason behind it. For a moment they were speechless. Wait. Only then did Noah react. He stared blankly at her. Since when did I hide from Mira and prepare for you to guard against danger? Like Mira, she was no longer active in the magic world as a sorcerer. Instead, she was a full-time assistant and waitress in the guild. Her life was very comfortable. How could there be any danger in such a life? Moreover, before returning to this world, Noah really didn't have many tricks up his sleeve. Naturally, he didn't prepare anything for Lysana to guard against danger. If he did, Noah definitely wouldn't treat Mira differently and neglect her. This was the only thing that Noah was absolutely certain of. Noah loved Mira and Lysana equally. There was never a saying of who he loved more. She should know this better than anyone else, right? Thus she smiled slyly. Of course I'm lying to Big Sister Mira. If Big Brother Noah really prepared such an important thing for me, how could I not tell Big Sister Mira immediately? Hearing this, the corners of Noah's eyes began to twitch. Oh. Lucy laughed out loud. Noah, you're in trouble this time. Not to mention Lucy, even Lebby, Kana, and even Julian were snickering. Wasn't that right? Undoubtedly, there was no difference in treatment. Now that Lysana had cheated him, Noah could already imagine how aggrieved Mira would be when they met again. Noah really didn't feel good. When Noah's expression darkened, Wendy hurriedly changed the topic as if to smooth things over. Then, which S-rank sorcerer did Big Sister Ruby and Big Sister Julian meet this time? Hearing this, Lebby and Julian seemed to recall the terrifying opponent they had encountered in the first phase of the experiment. Their faces darkened and even turned green. However, at the same time, a look of relief appeared on their faces. Time once again returned to 30 minutes ago. Lise Anna and Elfman were the second-last team to arrive at Celestial Wolf Island. As for Lebby and Julian, they were the fourth group to arrive at Heavenly Wolf Island after Noah and Wendy, Naz and Habby, and Gadjaloo and Lily. However, Lebby and Julian, who had chosen the route before Lise Anna and Elfman, were much slower than Lise Anna and Elfman's team. The reason was naturally because they met the most merciless obstacle. Boom! Accompanied by the sound of an explosion, a shocking shock wave suddenly spread out in all directions in the vast tunnel. Ah! Under the shocking impact, Lebby and Julian were both sent flying. Like kites with their strings cut, they smashed into the walls on both sides of the tunnel. Then they slowly slid down, their faces contorted in pain. It's a lie, right? Julian, who was lying on the ground, muttered in disbelief. Julian? He didn't even have the strength to fight back? Once upon a time, Julian was also an S-rank sorcerer in Phantom Lord. Although every guild's S-rank sorcerer had a different level of strength due to the difficulty of promotion, the Phantom Lord was once the #1 guild in the Kingdom of Fiori alongside Fairy Tail. Even if the promotion difficulty of the S-rank sorcerer in the guild was lower than that of Fairy Tail, it wouldn't be much lower. At the very least, that was what Julian thought. That was why Julian, who had once been an S-rank high mage in another guild, thought that even if he wasn't a match for an active S-rank high mage, he would at least be able to put up a fight. Now this idea was completely destroyed by the Queen of the Fairies. What's wrong? With an awe-inspiring voice, Elusa walked out of the shadows in front of him with heavy footsteps of her steel boots hitting the ground. Is it over just like that? Both Lebby and Julian raised their heads with difficulty and looked forward. At that moment, Elusha was wearing a set of armor. It was a set of green armor with fins just like a mermaid's. The ears had also turned into fins. Wearing this set of armor, Elusa held a light green sword in her hand and had a stern expression on her face. If you can't even handle this, then don't even think about becoming an S-rank sorcerer. Hearing this, Julian bit his lips and forced himself to stand up, still in pain. Wait, Julian. Julian. Levi also struggled to stand up, but she still tried to persuade him. That's the Sea King's armor, which can increase your resistance to water magic and nullify water magic attacks. If you use water magic, even if you force yourself to attack, you won't be able to defeat Elusa. Then what should we do? Julian helplessly asked Lebby for help. Jalibian only knows water elemental magic. Lebby was also at her wit's end, but inadvertently, Lebby touched a red string in front of her. She paused for a moment, then an idea flashed through her mind. Aren't you going to continue attacking? Elusha's merciless whipping was getting closer and closer. If that's the case, then I'll do it. Just as Elusha was about to rush forward, Lebby suddenly shouted, Hey! I have something very important to tell you. Chapter 11:25. I have something very important to tell you. When these words came out of Leia's mouth, Ilusa, who was about to charge forward, abruptly came to a halt. However, Elusha's delicate face did not show any signs of surprise. Instead, it was rather calm. I see. You know that your opponent can't face you head-on, so you're starting to use a strategy? While saying that, Ilusa didn't seem to be worried at all about what strategy Layla would use. Instead, she seemed to be looking forward to it and smiled confidently. All right, Leia. Let me see what strategy you're going to use. Leia was rather helpless when she saw that Elusha had seen through her plan with just a few words. At this juncture, she suddenly claimed that she had something important to say. Other than using a strategy, what else could it be? Elusha was the type of person who was especially smart. Therefore, it was a piece of cake for Elusha to see through her plan. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible to use a strategy that could shake Elusha. However, just because it was close to impossible didn't mean it was absolutely impossible. Leia, who was enduring the pain in her body, gripped the red string around her neck tightly as a smile appeared on her slightly childish face. Hey Alusha, if someone suddenly proposes to you, what do you plan to do? The entire place fell silent. Propose. Alusha was stunned. Propose. Julian was also stunned. When they finally reacted, the two girls' pretty faces were filled with excitement. Propose. Propose? The sternness on Alusha's face disappeared in an instant. It was as if she had turned into the most ordinary girl. She took 2 steps back and looked at Leia as she stuttered. That means. He wants me to get married? That's right. Leia made a victory sign in her heart and quickly said. If someone wants to marry you, what do you plan to do? Will you agree? Wait. Alusha quickly raised a hand to stop Leia from speaking. She forced herself to appear calm, but her slightly stiff expression had already betrayed Alusha's inner thoughts. Why would you suddenly ask such a question? That's the important thing I want to tell you. Lebby sighed as if she was having a hard time thinking about what to say. Actually, Alusha, in our guild, there has always been someone who wants to marry all the girls. Levi's sudden and shocking words left Alusha completely dumbfounded. You. What did you say? Alusha said in shock. You're saying that someone in the guild wants to marry all the girls? Even Alusha, who had no immunity to the word marriage, was suspicious of such a ridiculous statement. However, in the face of Alusha's suspicion, Lebby acted as if she knew what was going on. It's true, I'm not lying to you, Leia said with a serious face as if she was trying to trick a child. Think about it carefully, Alusha. Isn't there such a winner in our guild? Alusha was taken aback by Lebby's words. Then, she finally understood what Lebby meant and spoke in a tone full of uncertainty. You mean Noah? After saying that, Alusha did not give Leia a chance to reply. Impossible. Noah isn't that kind of person. How do you know that Noah isn't that kind of person? Lebby bowed deeply to Noah in her heart and apologized. Then, she said with some indignation in her voice. If Noah isn't that kind of person, why would he be engaged to both Mira and Lysana at the same time? That's because Mira and Lysana are both in love with Noah. Noah also responded to their feelings. That's the result. Alusha said righteously. I'm sure that Noah is absolutely sincere to Mira and Lysana. We grew up together and I can see that. Leia, I won't allow you to slander your companions like that. Indeed, both Mira and Lysana are in love with Noah. I don't suspect that Noah's feelings for Mira and Lysana are fake, Leia said. But if Noah can like both Mira and Lysana at the same time, it's not impossible for him to like the other girls in the guild, right? That's true. Alusha frowned. But ever since he got engaged to Mira and Lysana, Noah hasn't shown any signs of being a playboy. That's where you're wrong, Alusha. Lebby's expression suddenly turned sad and distressed. It was as if she wouldn't give up until she said something shocking. Actually, not only did Noah propose to Mira and Lysana, he also secretly proposed to me. Wah! Alusha's expression froze. Not to mention Alusha, even Julian's eyes widened as he stared at Lebby in disbelief, causing Lebby's face to turn red. Of course this time she was blushing for real. I know you don't believe me. She suppressed her shyness and pretended to be indignant as she spoke to Alusha. If you don't believe me, take a look at this. She then took out the red string that was hanging around her neck. Upon closer inspection, there was a small pouch that looked like an amulet tied to the red string. Leia opened the pouch and took something out. The next moment, both Alusha and Julian were stunned. This was because the thing that Ruby took out from the bag was a small diamond. Alusha, you must have seen the diamond ring that Noah used to propose to Mira and Lysana, right? Leia opened her palm and looked at Alusha. She then looked at Alusha. Look, isn't the diamond on Mira and Lysana's rings exactly the same as this one? Exactly the same? Of course it was exactly the same. Back then, when Noah ordered the 2 rings, there was a small portion of the diamond left behind. Leia had secretly taken it away and put it into a pouch that looked like an amulet. She then tied it with a red string and wore it like a necklace. Now, the diamond that Lebby took out was the small part of the diamond that she had secretly hidden back then. This is what Noah used to propose to me. When she said this, Lebby's pretty face was also completely red. This way you should believe me, right? No. But this isn't right. Alicia was completely confused. Noah shouldn't be that kind of person. We grew up together, and no one knows him better than I do. I know that if it were Noah, even if he were to propose to a third person, he would do it openly so that she would have the same happiness as Mira and Lisanna. He would never cheat on her like this. That's right, that's it. He didn't say it out loud because Noah's proposal isn't over yet. Layla added fuel to the fire as if she was striking while the iron was hot. Let me tell you a secret, Alicia. Noah actually prepared a ring to propose to you. To me. Alusa's head turned red with a bang, and smoke rose from it. No. I'm not mentally prepared yet. To get married. Leia's eyes lit up when she saw that Alicia was in a state of confusion. She finally made her final move. I'm not lying to you, Alicia. I saw it with my own eyes. The ring that Noah was going to propose to you with is the same diamond as mine. If you don't believe me, I can show you this. Without hesitation, Leia tossed the diamond in her hand towards Alicia. Seeing this, Alicia unexpectedly stepped forward and stretched out her hand towards the diamond that was thrown over. Now, in the next moment, Lebby and Julian rushed toward Alusa at the same time. What happened next made sense again. Alicia, who had no immunity against marriage, didn't even have time to react before she was attacked by Leia and Julian. She suffered the same fate as Mira. Chapter 11:26. When he recalled the process of defeating Alicia, Julian smiled sheepishly, while Rebby's face turned slightly red. She couldn't help but secretly grip the amulet hidden in her clothes. Although it was a strategy that she had no other choice, it was a fact that Rebby secretly hid the diamond left over from Noah's custom-made ring. Initially, Rebby only treated the diamond as an amulet, which was why she always wore it on her body. Now that Alicia knew about this matter, even if Alicia knew that Rebby's lie was only a temporary measure, the fact that Rebby secretly hid the diamond left over from Noah's custom-made ring was inevitably exposed. Unfortunately, only Rebby and the jewelry store owner knew that the diamond was left over from Noah's custom-made ring. Even Noah himself didn't know about this. What should I do if Alicia really misunderstands? With that thought, Rebby secretly clenched her fists. No, I must find Alicia and have a good chat afterwards. Find Alicia and have a chat? Noah cast a puzzled gaze at Rebby. What do you want to talk about? Nothing. Rebby, who was stared at by Noah, blushed again. Her heartbeat quickened slightly, and she hurriedly stopped her delusions and changed the topic. Why yes, we're the only 4 groups that passed the first stage of the experiment, right? Gray and Gadgelou's teams have been defeated by us. Lucy spoke in high spirits as if she had really defeated Gray and Gadgelou herself. Only Naz's team is left. Naz. Lisanna tapped her cheek with a finger and tilted her head. Brother Noah and Wendy met Lax's brother Elfie and I met Sister Mira, Rebby and Julian met Alicia, and Lucy and Kana met the 3 groups. Then the S-rank sorcerer guarding the remaining passage. She didn't finish her sentence. Because everyone thought of it. Naz met Kilda's, right? Kana's expression was slightly complicated, but more than that, it was pity for Naz. What bad luck. Admittedly, Naz's strength was one of the best in Fairy Tale, but Kilda's was the strongest sorcerer in the guild. Even Alicia could defeat Naz in one hit, let alone Kilda's, who was far stronger than Alicia. Is that so? Lucy said with some pity. Gray was eliminated, will Naz be eliminated too? Just as everyone was thinking about this, Noah suddenly had a thought and smiled. That's not necessarily true. Everyone present was stunned. Under everyone's gaze, Noah turned his head and looked at the exit of the remaining passage. Everyone followed Noah's gaze and looked over. In the next second, a figure slowly walked out from the inside of the passage, and there was a cat with open wings floating in the air beside him. Who else could it be but Naz and Habby? Naz actually passed Kilda's test. If it was a normal situation, everyone would be shocked. However, at this very moment, no one present had the energy to be shocked. It was because Naz, who had walked out of the passage, was not as noisy and carefree as before. Instead, he lowered his head and hid his expression under the shadows. He looked extremely depressed, which was very abnormal. It was this extremely abnormal scene that caused everyone to be unable to care about being shocked. Habby. Lucy looked at Habby in bewilderment. What happened? Happy didn't speak. He just spread his hands helplessly with a helpless look, which made everyone look at each other. Only Noah more or less guessed the reason why Naz had such an abnormal performance. After defeating Raxus, whether it was Noah or Wendy, they both felt that Raxus had burst out with an extremely shocking amount of magic power. Even Noah and Wendy, who were so far away, felt it, not to mention Naz, who was close to Kilda's in the passage. Most likely, the competitive Naz must have felt the despairing difference in strength from Kilda's, which was why he fell into a depressed state. After all, if Naz really defeated Kilda's with Naz's character, he would definitely make a fuss. With such a depressed look now, no one would think that Naz really relied on his strength to defeat Kilda's to pass the first stage of the experiment. So, it must be that Kilda's recognized Naz and took the initiative to let him pass, right? And obviously, Naz didn't seem to be able to accept such a result. At that moment, everyone looked at Naz, who lowered his head and fell into depression, and they didn't know what to say for a while. However, Naz's footsteps didn't stop, but he walked straight in the direction of Noah. Noah looked straight at Naz, didn't speak, didn't make any expression, and remained silent. Under such circumstances, Naz came in front of Noah, and immediately raised his head to meet Noah's gaze. His eyes were filled with an unprecedented strong will. "Hey Noah." Naz slowly spat out such a sentence. "I will definitely become stronger. I know." Noah looked into Naz's eyes and nodded. "I also believe that you can definitely do it." "Is that so?" The smile on Naz's face returned little by little. "At that time, will you fight with me?" Hearing this, Noah smiled indifferently. "I can accompany you at any time." The strong will in Naz's eyes was immediately replaced by satisfaction. "Good." Naz pointed to everyone present and made a declaration. "Who can become an S-rank magic shooter? Let's fight it out." That declaration was as competitive as ever. However, everyone could clearly feel that in that competitive speech, there was a strong will that had never been there before. As a result, everyone was also ignited by Naz's words. "I won't lose." Kana's face was also full of determination. "Definitely become an S-rank magic shooter." "N." Lucy nodded in agreement. "I will definitely make Kana become an S-rank magic shooter." Zhubian won't lose either. Zhubian, who didn't have any desire to fight before, was also excited. "Zhubian will definitely work hard." "Come on, Julian." Levi clenched her small fists. "We will definitely win in the end." "Man," Elfman shouted. "The one who wins in the end is a real man." "Although I'm very supportive of Brother Noah, I won't admit defeat so easily." Lise Anna smiled sweetly. "At least, except for Big Brother Noah, I will definitely not lose to anyone. I will work hard too." Wendy quickly expressed her opinion. "I will definitely work hard to help Big Brother Noah." Noah didn't say anything. He just patted Wendy's head and looked at Naz. Although the smile on his face wasn't very confident, it revealed a strong courage. Naz grinned and laughed. "Very good, I'm burning. Love." Hubby was so excited that he flew around in the air. Looking at the scene that was completely ignited by Naz's will, Noah's heart was filled with all kinds of emotions. Such charisma, as expected of a dragon's child. At this moment, another voice suddenly cut in. "It's best if you can have confidence." Hearing this voice, everyone turned their heads and looked at the source of the voice. There, Makarov walked over step by step, looked around at everyone and nodded. "There are actually so many teams that passed the first stage of the experiment. Wasn't that right? 7 routes, 3 of them would intersect and only one team could be determined. The other 4 routes were all guarded by S-rank magic shooters. If something went wrong, it could really lead to only one team being able to pass the first stage of the experiment. Now, all 4 S-rank magic shooters had been broken through. Even if the rest didn't break through directly except for Noah, it was still surprising. Then, let's begin the second stage of the experiment, Makarov directly announced. Next, you must find the mausoleum of the first president, Mavis Viamilio. The time limit is 6 hours. If you don't reach the destination in 6 hours, the team will be eliminated. Understood? Yes. Everyone nodded in response. Chapter 11:27. In one of the corners of Celestial Wolf Island, there was a temporary camp. It was made up of several tents, and it looked like a campsite used for camping. At this time, in one of the tents in the camp, Gray, Gadjaloo, Freed, and Lily were lying on top of it. They had bruises all over their bodies, and they were rubbing them while groaning in pain. "It hurts." Gray rubbed his almost disfigured face and looked at Gadjaloo with a ferocious gaze. "You bastard, aren't you being too heavy-handed?" "What does it have to do with me?" Gadjaloo said with his nose in the air. "You're too weak. I didn't even have time to use my strength. What did you say?" Gray was furious. Just as he was about to get up, he lay down again because he pulled his wound. Gadjaloo just wanted to mock him, but he also pulled his wound, causing him to howl in pain. Looking at Gray and Gadjaloo, who still insisted on quarreling even in their injured state, Freed and Lily, who were also lying on the side, were quite speechless. But there was nothing they could do about it. The gap in strength between these four people was not very big. If they were to fight, it would only end in a situation where both sides would suffer great losses. Of course, if there was a winner, then presumably, even if they were seriously injured, Gray and Gadjaloo wouldn't be so hot-tempered, right? The problem was that not only did the team of Gray and Gadjaloo not have a winner, but Lucy and Kana also took advantage of the situation and eliminated both Gray and Gadjaloo. That was the reason why these two people were so noisy. Like Gray and Gadjaloo, Freed and Lily were also injured in the fight, and now they were lying here. But compared to Gray and Gadjaloo, who were making a ruckus after being picked up, Freed and Lily weren't that unwilling. If one had to say what kind of emotion he would have after this result, it would only be regret. "I already knew beforehand that there would be people from Group 3 joining the chaotic battle. In the end, I still made the mistake of being a fisherman benefiting from the fight between the sandpiper and the clam," Freed sighed. "How embarrassing. There's nothing we can do about it." Lily's injuries were the lightest, and he was also the most open-minded. "After all, we are just partners of Gadjaloo and Gray. Our main responsibility is to support them. Since they want to fight, we can only accompany them." In fact, it was the two impatient people, Gray and Gadjaloo, who couldn't wait to fight when they encountered each other in the passage. Even Fred and Lily could only participate in the battle. They fought until both sides were injured. In the end, it led to Lucy and Kana taking advantage of the situation. If Gray and Gadjaloo could obediently wait for Kana and Lucy to appear, the result would definitely not be like this. It's too late to say anything now. Since it has already happened, there's nothing we can do about it. Freed seemed to have gotten over it, but then he frowned again and looked in a direction. But what's going on with them? Hearing this, Lily also looked over, and then revealed a look of confusion. He saw that at a wooden table outside the tent, Alusha and Mira were sitting there with their heads lowered, falling into a state of extreme depression. Alusha's expression alternated between green and red. "I didn't expect that I would actually fall for such an obvious trick, but there's nothing I can do about it. It's a sacred marriage. Besides, it's not like I haven't thought about getting married, not to mention that the other party is Noah." Obviously, Alusha's expression turned green because she regretted it, and her expression turned red because she was still immersed in the delusion of marriage. As for Mira, not only was she completely depressed, but she also seemed to be unwilling to believe the truth as she kept muttering, "Noah really does love Anna a little more. A little more, a little more." It seemed that those words had really ruthlessly stabbed Myra's heart, causing her to bleed non-stop. Just like that, the two strongest female sorcerers in the Fiori Kingdom's #1 guild, Fairy Tale, were completely immersed in their own world, and their backs were dim. Seeing this scene, Freed and Lily could only look at each other. After a while, Lily lamented, "There are indeed many weirdos in this guild." "You can't say that," Freed said in a serious tone. "Maybe Alusha and Mira really have something on their minds, and as companions we should go and care for them." "Is that so?" Lily frowned. "But my intuition tells me that it's better not to get close to Alusha and Mira now." Just as he finished speaking, a voice of agreement sounded. "I feel the same." The one who said this was Bikesro, who had just picked some wild vegetables from the forest. "Alusha and Mira are very dangerous right now, and I don't want my babies to be hurt." The marionettes floating around Bikesro began to jump up and down. "Anyway, just don't bother with them." Abigrin also walked out of the forest with a bunch of wild fruits in her hands. She looked like she had nothing to do with this matter. It's not like you don't know what those two women are like when they're angry. Oh? You're back? Fred propped himself up and looked around. Then he asked in confusion. Where's Laxus? Bikesrow, Abiglin and Bikesrow glanced at each other, and their expressions turned solemn. Actually, Abra hesitated for a moment and said, just now we found a very strange place in the forest. A strange place? Fried was startled, and his expression became even more puzzled. What kind of strange place? We don't know how to describe it. Bikesrow scratched his head and could only say so. So Laxus and Kildas went there to take a look. Is that so? Fried nodded his head in understanding. He raised his eyes and looked at the forest before him. I hope nothing strange happens again. At the same time, Laxus and Kildas were standing in an open space deep in the forest, and their expressions were heavy. Upon closer inspection, the scene in front of Laxus and Kildas was more or less creepy. The ground was burnt yellow. The trees were withered. The fallen leaves seemed to have been burned to ashes by fire, and as soon as the wind blew, they immediately scattered. The air was filled with an extremely uncomfortable aura, and it made the space look slightly dim. It was quite strange. Such a creepy and extremely uncomfortable place made Laxus and Kildas' expressions become extremely heavy. Kildas even made an assertion. This is not a natural scene but a man-made one. Laxus nodded and said in a deep voice, although I don't feel the aura of mana, the mana on Heavenly Wolf Island is in disorder. It is clearly caused by some mysterious power. In fact, in this world where mana prevailed, there were many strange places like this. Usually, they were caused by mana, and would not be treated so seriously by people like Laxus and Kildas. However, it was precisely because Laxus and Kildas were not ordinary people that they could feel the abnormality here. Normal mana would not be able to cause this abnormality. What the hell is going on? In another corner of the forest on Heavenly Wolf Island, Noah, who was heading towards Mavis Mausoleum, suddenly stopped and turned his head, looking into the distance. Big brother Noah? Wendy asked in confusion. What's wrong? Noah did not reply. He only looked in that direction, and there was a slight fluctuation in his eyes. The uneasiness that he felt not long ago rose in Noah's heart again. Noah did not know. In the direction that he was looking, a young man with short black hair, gray eyes, and black clothes with a long white cloth tied around his body walked slowly in the forest. His eyes were extremely dim, and there was no sign of life. After an unknown period of time, the young man who was walking slowly murmured, "When will I be able to die as I wish?" Chapter 11:28. Just as Celestial Wolf Island began to undergo some changes due to a small anomaly, a magic airship was slowly traveling in the sky far away from Celestial Wolf Island. If Noah were here, he would definitely recognize this magic airship. Because not long ago, this magic airship had openly barged in front of Noah, and even almost barged into Magnolia. Inside such a magic airship there was a vast hall. In the hall, 7 people were lined up in a row facing forward. There was a throne there. A person sat on the throne. He was an old man wearing pitch-black armor with an eye patch over his right eye. His face and eyes were extremely fierce. Surprisingly, it was the guild leader of the strongest dark guild in the Baram Alliance, Grimoire Heart, Hades. As for the 7 people standing in a row in front of Hades, they were the 7 members of the Grimoire Heart, a group that no one in the underworld didn't know about. He had a head of disheveled golden hair, and his eyes were red, but they seemed to be made up of circles Zankalo. He looked like a goat and held a book in his hand Caprico. He wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses and combed his hair back. It was easy to see that he was a young man who paid attention to his appearance. Lucyros. He was a fat man with a fat body, a double chin and thick eyebrows cane. He had a short appearance and wore a wing-shaped earpiece next to his ear melty. He was dressed like a minority, and his skin was slightly dark Azuma. There was also a coquettish girl with waist-length black hair that was slightly purplish. A white hair clip was tied in between her hair, and she wore tight clothes that completely displayed her near-perfect figure Urutia. They were known as the 7 families of Purgatory, and were personally trained by Hades. Each of them was a 7 magic shooter. At this time they all appeared in the hall of this magic airship. Leader Hades. The first to speak was Urutia. Eurulia raised the crystal ball in her hand above her head, and said this sentence in a somewhat overjoyed manner. We found Jerf. Oh! Hades immediately reacted. He straightened his body and stared at Eurutia. You really found it? Yes. Eurulia smiled sweetly. Just now we did indeed capture Jerf's aura. That pure darkness is a power that no one other than Jerf can possess. Really? Hades's hand, which was resting on the throne, tightened little by little. A fierce light flashed through his eyes. Finally found it, Jerf. It wasn't just Hades. Many of the grimoire heart sorcerers present, including Eurutia, appeared to be rather happy. We finally found him. Zancro laughed maniacally. The world of great magic that we've been looking forward to can finally be realized. Do you think it's that easy? Caprico closed the book in his hand and said without changing his expression. Even if we find Jerf, we have to make him acknowledge our ideals and change this world. Change the world. Luceiros pushed his glasses up slightly. He put one hand in front of him and the other hand in front of him as if he was performing a musical. What beautiful words! Cain was trembling all over. His fat body even began to sweat. I also, I think so too, Melty interrupted Cain's speech and said expressionlessly. That's what Cain wants to say. It doesn't matter to me. Azuma's resolute face was expressionless, but his eyes were bright. As long as there's someone powerful who can satisfy me, that's enough. It's precisely because this world is full of useless weaklings that we need Jerf. We need the world of great magic, Eurutia said with pursed lips. Only a world with sorcerers who can use magic and no ordinary people, who don't have power, can give birth to someone powerful who can satisfy you. Right? Most importantly, in the world of great magic, there's the demonic abyss that we're searching for. Hades narrowed his eyes. That's our goal. Hearing this, everyone nodded one after another. But President Hades, Eurutia suddenly changed the topic. As far as we know, Jerf's current location seems to be a little special. It would be strange if the location of the most vicious black sorcerer in history wasn't special. Hades wasn't surprised at all. Where's Jerf now? It's also a special place for the president, Eurulia said calmly. Jerf's current location is the Holy Land of Fairy Tale, Celestial Wolf Island. Celestial Wolf Island. Hades raised his eyes slightly. I see. It's indeed a very special place. I've heard that Fairy Tale is currently conducting the S-rank magic shooter advancement test on Heavenly Wolf Island. All the elites of the guild are gathered on the island. Eurutia's voice suddenly lowered, and her eyes became gloomy. That person is there as well. Hearing this, the atmosphere in the hall of the airship became heavy. Everyone present knew who the person Eurutia was talking about was. Not long ago, that person fought to a draw with Hades, whom the 7 families of purgatory worshipped as a god. Even Hades couldn't do anything to that person. When this matter was first known, almost no one here was willing to believe it. But after Hades himself tacitly acknowledged this matter, the 7 families of purgatory fell silent. In particular Eurutia, who had personally witnessed the entire process of the earth-shattering battle between Noah and Hades, developed some reverence and fear for that person. That brat is also on Celestial Wolf Island? Hades's face was cold. Well, it's about time for me to get sick of watching Fairy Tale. A guild that doesn't even understand that the essence of magic is darkness, and still yearns for the complete opposite of light. Let's just let it become history together with that little brat. The moment he finished speaking, an extremely astonishing and sinister magic power continuously rose from Hades' body. Feeling that frightening magic power, the arch-shooters of the 7 families of purgatory all held their breaths. Then they all reacted differently. A arch-shooter that even guild leader Hades can't do anything to? Zancalo clenched his fist, and traces of pitch-black flames flitted across it. I don't believe that kind of thing. Noah Dole? Azuma's eyes burned with a raging fighting spirit. I really hope to fight him. The others also had their own thoughts. Most of them were arrogant and unruly, and wanted to defeat Noah and prove their strength. Only Murdy lowered her head and remained silent. Cheer up, Murdy. Eurutia glanced at Murdy and sighed. You're our trump card to deal with that person. Only you can truly kill him, so don't forget your mission. Murty's gaze fluctuated slightly, but soon returned to normal and spat out a sentence. I'll kill him. Bang! Accompanied by a heavy muffled sound, a huge magic beast flew out like a kite with a broken string. After heavily smashing into a cliff, its head tilted and it fainted. Phew! Noah breathed a sigh of relief, withdrew his fist and laughed bitterly. This forest is still the same as before. There are magic beasts everywhere. Forget it, compared to the other teams that don't know their destination, we're already considered lucky. Hearing this, Wendy looked straight at Noah and did not look away. Noah asked doubtfully, "What's wrong?" "That." Wendy hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother Noah, is there something on your mind?" Chapter 11:29. Wendy's words caused Noah to be slightly stunned at first. Then he smiled slightly. "Is it that obvious?" Wendy nodded, her eyes never leaving Noah. Wendy was obviously very concerned about Noah's abnormality. In fact, from the beginning to the end, Noah did not do anything different from before, or acted differently from before. Generally speaking, it was impossible to tell if Noah had something on his mind just by looking at him. However, Wendy was able to tell. The same thing had happened to Mira and Lysana. No matter how normal Noah acted, as long as Noah had something on his mind, his two delicate fiancés would be able to detect it immediately. According to Lysana, this was the privilege of being his wife. There was no woman who would not be able to detect the abnormality of the man who shared a bed with her all day. Otherwise, why would most men who cheated on their wives be exposed in the end? This was the reason. This was what Lysana said. Mira smiled but did not say anything. She had never explained why she could tell that Noah had something on his mind so easily. However, Noah knew that this was probably a little telepathic connection between a man and a woman who were in love with each other. In layman's terms, this was probably the so-called sixth sense of a woman. Wendy was able to detect Noah's abnormality probably because of her intuition as well. At least that was what Noah thought. "Brother Noah, is there something bothering you?" Wendy carefully expressed her thoughts. "Can I help Brother Noah?" In other words, she wanted Noah to have a chat with Wendy. "There's nothing to hide." Noah pondered for a moment before he sighed. "Actually, I've been feeling a little uneasy since the beginning. Restless." Wendy blinked her eyes. Her expression was more or less a little confused. "What do you mean by that?" "It would be great if I knew." Noah patted Wendy's head and looked up at the sky. "It's just that I feel that something big is about to happen here." "Something big?" Wendy's expression was still confused, but she still spoke gently. "Maybe Brother Noah is just overthinking it? I'd rather be the one overthinking it." Noah shook his head. "But I have a feeling that something big is going to happen here this time." This time, Wendy did not know what to say. Seeing Wendy's clumsy look of wanting to comfort Noah and make him feel better but not knowing what to say, Noah couldn't help but smile and pat Wendy's little head. "All right, maybe I'm overthinking it. Don't look so pitiful. People who don't know better might think that I don't want you." "Brother Noah. Brother Noah would never do that," Wendy said. However, despite saying that, Wendy couldn't help but hold Noah's hand tightly. Tears began to accumulate in her adorable eyes, as though she was a calf that was about to be sold in the market. It was really pitiful to see her like that. Such a cute appearance made Noah unable to help but pinch Wendy's cheeks lightly. His doting feelings were clearly displayed. "I'm just joking. Why are you so nervous?" "I'm not nervous," Wendy weakly retorted. Seeing this, Noah shook his head with a smile. He let Wendy hold his hand and said, "All right, let's go. All right, let's keep going. Otherwise, she'll definitely arrive before us." Lysana had once followed Noah to Celestial Wolf Island. At that time, Noah and Lysana had found Mavis Mausoleum under the guidance of the first president. Now, although 2 years had passed, Lysana should not have forgotten the location of Mavis Mausoleum. If he didn't hurry over, that little girl would definitely be impatient and arrive before Noah. Then she would use this opportunity to tease Noah. As for the others, they would not even know the location of Mavis Mausoleum. They would probably spend quite a bit of time wandering around Celestial Wolf Island, and might even be eliminated when the time limit was up. Thus, in this segment, Noah and Lysana, who knew the location of Mavis Mausoleum, had a huge advantage that the others did not have. 6 hours was enough for Noah and Lisanna to arrive at the location of Mavis' mausoleum. Immediately, under Noah's lead, Wendy slowly moved towards the celestial wolf tree at the center of Celestial Wolf Island. It was a pity that Noah and Wendy's journey did not last long. Roughly 20 minutes later, when Noah cleanly dealt with another batch of magical beasts that had suddenly jumped out, a strange feeling appeared in the range of Noah's sensory ability. What kind of feeling was that? Noah could not explain it clearly. Noah only knew that when that feeling appeared in the range of his sensory ability, his body abruptly started to heat up, and his limbs started to involuntarily surge with power. Sensing this feeling, Noah's heart suddenly trembled. That was because this feeling was not unfamiliar to Noah. It was the premonition of the Godslayer's body entering a state of battle when encountering a god. Sensing this, Noah's heart suddenly trembled, and his footsteps immediately came to a halt. Wendy, who was happily holding Noah's hand, also stopped, a question mark appearing in her head. Big brother Noah? Noah did not have the spare energy to pay attention to Wendy, and instead turned his head abruptly, and spoke in a deep voice towards the direction of the nearby thicket. Who's there? Come out. As soon as his voice fell, the entire space was filled with an indescribable silence. Wendy sensed that the atmosphere was not right, and slightly hid behind Noah. Noah subconsciously protected Wendy behind him, and his gaze was fixed on the thicket in front of him. In the next second, a figure approached from afar, and with extremely clear footsteps and the sound of friction, slowly walked out of the thicket. It was a youth. He looked to be in his teens and was quite young. Like Noah, he had a head of pure black short hair, and his entire appearance gave off a harmless feeling. However, it was precisely this harmless-looking youth that made Noah's body slightly tense. Because the feeling that made Noah feel as if he had met a god, and his body automatically entered battle mode, came from the youth in front of him. If that feeling was a little stronger, then Noah's body would definitely enter battle mode in an instant. At that time, Noah could basically be sure that he had met the god that the god slayer was destined to kill. However, although the youth in front of him made Noah's body instinctively feel as if he had met a god, Noah could be sure that he was definitely not a god. The reason was also stated that feeling was too weak, and could only barely make Noah's body instinctively react, and was far from being able to enter battle mode. But even so, it was enough to make Noah pay attention. Even if the other party was not a real god, but to be able to make Noah's body react as if he had met a god, it was enough to prove that the other party was not simple. Under such circumstances, Noah stared at the youth and spoke indifferently. Who are you? The young man didn't say anything. Just like Noah, who was staring at him closely, he stared at Noah and opened his mouth. And who are you? Why do I feel that you are extremely dangerous? If those who knew the youth's true identity were to hear what he was saying to Noah, they would definitely be very shocked. Unfortunately, Noah was not clear about the youth's identity, and only knew that he was definitely not someone he knew. Answer my question first. Noah's tone began to carry some hostility. Why are you, who is not a member of our guild, in our guild's sacred land? Hearing this, the youth fell silent. I see. The youth's face was somewhat melancholy. Is this island managed by someone? Hearing this, Noah's brows furrowed deeply. Could it be that this person did not come specifically for Celestial Wolf Island, and had accidentally entered? Just as Noah had such a thought, the youth's face suddenly changed, and he fiercely covered his head. A terrifying aura suddenly rose from his body. Chapter 11:30. Ugh! The young man who suddenly appeared in front of Noah and Wendy bent down without any warning. His whole face became quite distorted, and he was sweating profusely. He seemed to be in extreme pain. No! No! The young man held his head like this, as if he was suppressing something. He groaned in pain and grief. Wait! I'll leave now! I'll leave now! Don't come out at this time! Please don't come out at this time. However, as the young man's pained and sorrowful voice echoed in the surroundings, something that seemed to be hidden in the young man's body seemed to ignore his will and crazily poured out, causing a terrifying aura to surge from the young man's body. Feeling the sudden surge of terrifying aura from the young man's body, Noah's pupils shrank, and in the next moment, his heart suddenly trembled. Oh no! Without any hesitation, Noah turned around and hugged the bewildered Wendy. Oh! At the same time, as if he was suppressing something in his body, the young man, who was holding his head with a face full of pain, suddenly let out a loud cry. Wang! Along with a strange trembling sound, a fog-like darkness surged out from the body of the youth who was screaming in pain. It was like the purest darkness, containing an extremely dense wave of death, a darkness that was so terrifying that it made people despair. The dense darkness, like a fog, surged crazily with the young man's body as the center. Then, like a pitch-black airflow, it revolved around the young man's body, and gradually formed a pitch-black protective shield. Ah! In the pure darkness, the young man screamed in pain, and his pair of extremely dim eyes suddenly turned into a strange red color. Immediately after, the dense darkness that constantly revolved around the young man's body suddenly exploded like a violent impact. Dong! In the blink of an eye, the terrifying darkness turned into a violent gust of wind that covered the entire surrounding space. At this moment, Noah just turned around and hugged Wendy in his arms. In other words, the whole change happened in less than a second. Thus, in order to protect Wendy, Noah's body was also covered by the thick darkness. Noah only had time to hug Wendy before everything in front of him turned into darkness, depriving Noah of his entire vision. At this moment, Noah felt as if his entire body had sunk into a bottomless swamp. Not only did his body become heavier bit by bit, but he also felt that the surrounding space had become extremely viscous, which was very uncomfortable. Then a strange phenomenon occurred. Buzz! In Noah's heart, the outline of the stone plate that was connected to the 10 patterns suddenly trembled and emitted a shocking light. Naturally, only Noah was able to detect this phenomenon. It was precisely because he noticed this phenomenon that Noah's heart suddenly tightened. He finally understood something. Immediately, the violent storm-like dense darkness slowly receded from the space and gradually dissipated. Noah only felt that his entire body that had become incomparably heavy suddenly became light again. In the surrounding space, the extremely uncomfortable stickiness also suddenly receded, and everything returned to its original state. Thus, Noah quickly opened his eyes. Everything that entered his eyes made Noah stunned for a moment. In the range of Noah's vision, the forest that was previously full of vitality directly turned into a land of death. Whether it was the flowers, grass, trees, wood, or even the air, all of them seemed to have been sucked out of life and all of them withered. What is this? Wendy, who was completely unable to react at all, opened her eyes subconsciously in Noah's arms. Similarly, she also saw the surrounding scene of death and was stunned for a moment. Only the young man who caused all of this seemed to be relieved of a heavy burden. He half knelt on the ground as if he had exhausted all his strength. While panting rapidly, he looked at Noah with an extremely incredulous expression. You didn't die?" The young man couldn't help but be shocked. From the changes in the surroundings, it could be seen that the dense darkness that originated from the young man just now could suck out all of life and cause life to wither in an instant. And obviously, humans were also in the same category. An ordinary human, if deeply trapped in the dense darkness just now, would have all of his life force sucked out and become a dried corpse? Noah, on the other hand, was not affected in the slightest. How could the young man not be shocked? But Noah did not seem to be surprised at all. Holding Wendy, he stared at the young man who was looking at him with an incredulous expression and said word by word, "You have the curse of God on your body?" Yes, this young man had the curse of God on his body. Therefore, even if the young man was not God, he could still make the God Slayer, Noah, as if he had encountered a god. However, it was quite weak. Therefore, when the dense darkness erupted, the authority in Noah's body that was called the God-slaying power reacted. The reason was this. And the young man's expression suddenly changed after hearing Noah's words. The way he looked at Noah also changed. So that's how it is. The young man stared at Noah, shocked and calm as he said this. "Do you have the same thing on your body?" After saying this, the young man seemed to deny his own statement and shook his head slightly. "No, that's not right. The thing that exists in your body is not a curse, but it is the same as the curse in my body, the power of God." Hearing this, Noah slowly clenched his fist. Noah was not surprised that a human had the curse of God on their body, because in the God-Slayer world, Noah also encountered the same thing. What really made Noah feel incredulous was not the curse on the young man's body, but the fact that the curse came from God itself. What did this mean? It meant that in this world there was also the existence of God. A human with the power of God. The young man muttered this sentence, and the way he looked at Noah changed again. If before, the young man's eyes were filled with disbelief and disbelief, then now, the young man's eyes were filled with pure joy. In fact, it could even be described as ecstatic. That's right, this will work, this will work. The young man stood up shakily, and stretched out a hand in the direction of Noah. His hand was still trembling, and he slowly walked in the direction of Noah as if he was crying tears of joy. If a human's power is unable to kill me who has the curse of God, then with the power of God you will definitely be able to kill me, you will definitely be able to. Seeing the young man crying tears of joy, Noah calmed down. Whether or not God existed in this world was no longer important. Anyway, it was not the first time Noah had seen God and even killed God. Now there was only one thing to be concerned about. You, who are you? This sentence caused the trembling young man to stop in his tracks, and his lips slowly opened. Just as the young man was about to say something, another accident happened. Boom! A huge flower of light suddenly exploded in the sky above Heavenly Wolf Island. It was so eye-catching that it would definitely attract the attention of everyone on Heavenly Wolf Island. Seeing this flower of light, Noah's expression finally changed. This was because that flower of light was the unique signal of the fairy tale. Once this signal appeared, it meant one thing. Enemy attack. Someone was about to attack Heavenly Wolf Island. Noah's ominous premonition came true. The young man raised his head and looked at the signal in the sky. Just as the young man raised his head, an impact exploded on the back of his head, causing him to groan and fall to the ground. Noah immediately stretched out his hand and grabbed the back of the young man's collar. Seeing Noah suddenly knock the young man unconscious, Wendy was completely at a loss. However, now was not the time to be concerned about this. At such an important moment, they could not allow an unidentified person who carried the curse of God to wander around Heavenly Wolf Island. Carrying the young man, Noah shouted at Wendy without turning his head. Wendy, let's go to the camp. Chapter 11:31. Whoosh! In the vast and dense forest, there was a black shadow that ordinary people could not compare to. One could only faintly see a black line flashing through the forest at an extremely fast speed. It caused a faint sound of breaking through the air, reverberating throughout the entire space. The trees in the forest were quite dense. It could be said that even the furthest distance between two trees was only a short 2 to 3 meters. With the black shadow's speed, it could cover this 2 to 3 meter distance in the blink of an eye. Traversing through such a dense forest at such an astonishing speed? Then it would definitely knock into a tree trunk in an instant, right? However, it was as if the black shadow wanted to overturn this theory. Its body was like a stream of light. It was as if it had turned on a radar that had a comprehensive scan. It clearly knew the location of every tree. With extreme agility that even the spirit monkey could not match, it shuttled through the dense forest without any hesitation. During this period, the black shadow was not able to knock into a single tree. Moreover, it was carrying a petite and cute young girl in one hand, and a young boy in the other, but it was not affected at all. This degree of agility and dexterity was simply shocking. Gradually, the speed of the black shadow was like a gust of wind, bringing along a whistling sound as it swept up layers of fallen leaves on the ground. Like an arrow released from a bow, it shot rapidly towards a certain direction in the forest. With such a speed, Wendy could not even open her eyes. She could only close her eyes tightly, her small hands tightly grabbing onto the clothes in front of Noah. Her entire delicate body was curled up in Noah's embrace, leaning all her weight on Noah's body, allowing Noah to carry her. With this speed, it would not take long for Noah to reach the camp of Fairy Tale on Heavenly Wolf Island, right? As long as there were no obstructions. Traversing through the dense forest, Noah's expression suddenly froze, and he abruptly halted his footsteps. Gee! The overly violent speed caused Noah's feet to rub against the ground as he suddenly came to a halt. He rubbed against the ground for a long distance, setting off a large amount of dust along the way. It was only after a while that he finally stopped. Whong! Almost at the same time, a series of tremors suddenly reverberated around Noah. It was the sound caused by the sudden appearance of fruit-like clusters of magic power in the air. Dazzling fruit-like clusters of mana appeared around Noah without any warning, completely surrounding him. Immediately after, those demonic energy light clusters suddenly blossomed with dazzling light. Bang! Accompanied by a neat roar, the magic power light clusters surrounding Noah suddenly exploded, setting off astonishing flames, setting off violent bursts of flames that spread in all directions like a wave of fire. Naturally, Noah, who was surrounded, was completely covered by it. The surrounding dense forest was also enveloped by the shocking explosion. In the blink of an eye, the corner of the dense forest turned into a sea of flames, causing the trees to burn. Even the ground was directly charred black in the shocking explosion. In such an explosion, except for Naz, the Dragon Slayer Archmage, who could even devour flames, basically no one could be unscathed, right? However, if one took a closer look, one would discover that at the center of the shocking explosion, a huge shield, which was like a city wall, was inlaid with flower petals like decorations in the middle, towering like an iron tower. In the next second, the huge shield slowly turned into a burst of light particles and disappeared into the sea of flames. Behind the shield, Noah carried Wendy, who had fainted due to the sudden impact, and lifted a young man in his hand. Then, he glared at the only tree that remained intact in the sea of flames ahead with a frighteningly cold gaze. Wong! In the next moment, a golden ripple fluctuated around Noah's body. Inside, an extremely luxurious spear suspended in the air, turning into a stream of light that blasted forward. Bang! The only intact tree in the sea of flames was shattered cleanly under the attack of the sharp spear. However, before that, a figure suddenly flashed out of the tree and retreated. After tapping the ground a few times with the tip of his foot, he stopped in a kneeling position. Have I been discovered? With such a sentence, the man who appeared from the tree raised his head, allowing a resolute face to enter Noah's vision. Sure enough, you're worthy of being the Archmage valued by President Hades. I've tried my best to align my mana with the mana of the Celestial Wolf Island, but in the end I was still discovered the moment I launched the attack. What a keen sense! The words of the man who suddenly launched an attack on Noah did not conceal his admiration for Noah at all. However, that didn't matter to Noah at all. What really made Noah react was a name that appeared in the other party's words. Hades. Noah suddenly looked forward. The one who attacked the Celestial Wolf Island is the Grimoire Heart? To be precise, it should be the vanguard of the Grimoire Heart. President Hades and the other officers have yet to arrive. The other party stood up and looked at Noah as he said so. Then, I am one of the officers of the Grimoire Heart, Azuma of the 7 families of Purgatory. What's the purpose? Noah ignored Azuma's words and asked indifferently. What's the purpose of attacking the Celestial Wolf Island? President Hades did indeed give 2 orders. Azuma did not hide anything, as if he was enjoying the confrontation with Noah, and said straightforwardly. One of them was to annihilate the fairy tale. The atmosphere in the sea of flames suddenly became oppressive. So that's how it is. Noah muttered as if he was talking to an invisible person. Just like how I've been thinking about how to get rid of the Grimoire Heart, you also want to get rid of the entire fairy tale, Hades. Azuma didn't know why, but when he heard Noah muttering to himself, he felt that something was wrong. However, Azuma ignored this anomaly. This was because at this moment, Azuma's heart was already burning with a fighting spirit that was more intense than any other emotion. President Hades and the other officers have yet to arrive at the Celestial Wolf Island. Among the 7 families of Purgatory, I am the only one who has arrived at the Celestial Wolf Island. Azuma looked straight at Noah, his eyes fluctuating with excitement. I heard that even President Hades couldn't do anything to you. This strength really makes me a little excited. Please be sure to show it in front of me. Before he could finish his sentence, Azuma's face suddenly froze. This was because in Azuma's heart, a sense of crisis suddenly shook violently for no reason, causing Azuma's heart to suddenly tighten. Without any hesitation, Azuma disregarded his image and rolled to the side on the ground. At this moment, golden ripples flashed out around Azuma's previous position, and under a neat vibration sound, they crazily spilled out one after another noble artifacts. Azuma dodged in time and fiercely collided with each other in the air. Dong! The powerful precious artifacts collided with each other, causing the violent impact to shake apart the sea of fire. At the same time, it also set off a shocking fire, causing an explosion that was not inferior to the previous one. The explosion was like a wave, spreading in all directions. Although Azuma did not care about his image and rolled away, avoiding the almost fatal direct attack, he was also affected by the shockwave of the explosive flames. He was directly blown away and hit a burning tree at the side. The flames burned Azuma's back, causing a burst of smoke to float from Azuma's back. Goo! Azuma suddenly let out a low groan. Chapter 1132. The intense pain from the burning flames on his back caused Azuma's face to distort slightly. The so-called 7 relatives of purgatory seemed to be very powerful, but in fact they were still just humans. Therefore, under the burning of the flames, Azuma couldn't help but let out a low roar. Then he clenched his teeth and used the force to bounce away from the burning tree. Annihilate the fairy tale? At this moment a cold voice sounded. I'd like to see if you're qualified. As soon as the voice fell, a monstrous magic power suddenly swept out from the space, causing the flames in the forest that had turned into a sea of fire to suddenly become stagnant. While the magic power whistled like a gale, it swayed crazily. Such a terrifying amount of magic power was all gushing out from the body of a single person. Seeing that Noah was able to create such a scene just by using his magic power, Azuma's expression finally changed. Unfortunately, Noah did not give Azuma too much time to be shocked. Wong! Along with the sound of the vibration, golden ripples reverberated behind Noah, and a variety of noble artifacts such as swords, sabers, spears, halberds, and so on popped out from within, pointing directly at Azuma. Immediately, the various types of noble artifacts such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and so on were like laser beams, cutting through the space and shooting in Azuma's direction. Seeing that Noah did not even say a few words of courtesy and immediately attacked in a temperamental manner, a ruthless glint flashed across Azuma's eyes. With a furious roar, the demonic energy in his body surged out, gathering at Azuma's feet and transmitting to the ground. In the next moment, thick tree roots suddenly drilled out from the ground. They were like vines that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. They were also like pythons. With a spiral, they welcomed the treasured artifacts that covered the sky and covered the earth. Bang! The treasures turned into laser beams and landed directly on the thick roots that were spiraling toward them. They were like missiles that struck directly, igniting terrifying flames. The impact caused ripples to surge out violently, causing the ground to tremble and crack. The shockwave swept through the surroundings, causing Noah's robes to flutter as he carried the unconscious Windy in his arms, and another unconscious youth in his other hand. But compared to Noah, Azuma wasn't as confident. He staggered back 2 steps from the shockwave. This guy's strength is actually so terrifying. Azuma looked at Noah in astonishment, but then he showed an excited look because of the fighting spirit that surged in his heart. Very good. Sure enough, you have the strength that even President Hades can't deal with. The battle that I've been dreaming of has finally appeared. At that moment, Azuma licked his lips and stretched out a hand toward Noah's direction, rolling up a strong magical power. Yijijian. A whirlwind suddenly formed around Azuma, rolling up pieces of leaves. Those leaves were like sharp swords, spiraling along with the whirlwind. Then like arrows they shot toward Noah's direction. Looking at the incoming barrage of leaves, Noah's eyes were filled with coldness from beginning to end. He suddenly stomped his feet on the ground, causing the magical power that surged around him to flow into the ground like water. Bang! Suddenly, in front of Noah, the ground suddenly exploded. A huge magical light beam that was dozens of feet in size burst out like a volcanic eruption, directly impacting the leaves that had turned into sharp arrows. Chi! Without any suspense, in that huge magical light beam, the leaves that contained a lot of magical power were suddenly annihilated and disappeared without a trace amidst the sound of burning. Ha! Azuma roared. He clenched his hand, which was surging with magic power, and slammed it into the ground, causing the ground to burst open, and thick tree roots drilled out of it. This time the thick tree roots twisted together in midair, turning into a huge fist that was entirely made of wood. Withstanding the fierce wind and waves of fire, in the whistling sound of the wind, it directly blasted toward Noah's direction. The huge fist covered Noah's entire body, blocking the flames from the surrounding sea of fire and the sunlight from the horizon, causing Noah to be shrouded in a huge shadow. However, in the face of such a huge blow, Noah just raised a hand with a cold face. Behind Noah, one of the many golden ripples suddenly expanded dozens of times, and a huge sword that was not inferior to the huge fist that covered the sky popped out. It rushed out and collided with the huge wooden fist. Boom! All of a sudden, a terrifying impact swept through the sea of fire like a storm, causing the burning trees in the sea of fire to fall radially, and the ground to crack inch by inch. The huge wooden fist was not purely made of wood, and it also contained an amazing amount of magical power. Under such circumstances, the fist made entirely of wood was even harder than rocks or even steel. A single strike from it could probably shatter a small hill. However, under the direct attack of the huge sword, the huge wooden fist was simply like an ordinary piece of wood, and was smashed into pieces that scattered in the surroundings. Boom! The huge sword's momentum did not diminish as it blasted into Azuma's position, smashing the ground to pieces. Azuma, on the other hand, rushed directly towards Noah before that. Noah raised his head and looked at Azuma, who was rushing towards him with a fierce face, as if he did not see anything. He did not intend to dodge, nor did he intend to evade. He just cast his gaze towards Azuma, who was getting closer and closer, with an indifferent face. This attitude made Azuma's heart go wild with alarm. Whoosh! At this moment, a sharp sound of something breaking through the air rang out from behind Azuma. Hearing this sound, Azuma turned his head abruptly, and then his pupils suddenly shrank. A crimson spear shot out from a golden ripple that had appeared behind Azuma at some point in time. It tore through the air and shot towards Azuma. In addition to the bright color, the crimson spear did not have much momentum compared to the huge sword before. It was just like a bright red arrow shooting towards Azuma. However, Azuma could feel it. On the crimson red spear, a rather fatal power quietly overflowed from it. Azuma's intuition told him that spear could not be avoided. No, it should be said that he absolutely could not avoid it. Once he dodged, he would definitely be pierced through by the scarlet spear. As a result, Azuma's hands and feet became ice cold in an instant. Of course, Azuma, whose hands and feet were ice cold, did not lose his rationality and reaction. While his expression changed sharply, the magical power in his body also surged out in an overwhelming manner. Great tree arc! Amidst Azuma's violent roar, thick tree roots suddenly burst out from the ground around Azuma. With a twist, Azuma's entire body was covered in them. Chi! At the same time, the crimson spear swept over violently. It finally vibrated with a strong magical aura, and the tip of the spear also gathered an astonishing amount of magical power, causing the red airflow to condense on it like a vortex. Gubalg Spear. As the real name of the noble artifact echoed in the space, the spear that was surging with magical aura suddenly fell on the thick tree roots that were soaring into the sky, and then suddenly it exploded. Boom! At this moment, the entire world began to tremble from the rumbling sound. In the sea of fire, a terrifying explosion swept out, bringing with it an extremely terrifying wave of fire and fire. It gradually expanded, covering most of the corner of the forest, and continued to expand. Chapter 1133. The terrifying waves of fire continued to surge like an earth-shattering wave in every corner of the forest. Amidst the waves of fire that permeated every corner of the forest, numerous trees were incinerated in the blink of an eye, turning into nothingness. The ground had also completely transformed into pitch-black scorched earth. Not even a slightly larger rock remained, having been annihilated by the astonishing explosion. At the center of such a terrifying explosion, a huge crater slowly appeared in the sea of flames, directly exposing the entire rock stratum. A lot of seawater even flowed out along the cracks in the ground. It was as if a hole had been punched through the entire island, making one's scalp numb. There was only a small area that was still intact. That was Noah, who was holding Wendy in his arms and carrying the mysterious boy in his other hand. As for the center of the huge crater, the thick roots that were twisted together like vines had long been charred black, and like scattered ashes, they peeled off little by little, exposing Azuma inside. However, although he was protected by the thick roots that contained powerful magic power, and were as hard as rocks or even steel, Azuma still seemed to have been burned all over his body. With a stagger, his knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. Cough cough. A few mouthfuls of saliva mixed with blood were violently coughed out by Azuma's coughing. The blood drained from Azuma's resolute face. His slightly tanned face turned incomparably pale, and his expression was incomparably weak. Even so, Azuma still stared closely at Noah, murmuring absent-mindedly, "So strong, really too strong." Azuma was the same as Wali, the kind of battle maniac who liked to fight with the strong. Therefore, when the grimoire heart was preparing to go to war with the fairy tale, Azuma, who was the first to arrive at the Heavenly Wolf Island, first went to find Noah. This was because the entire upper echelon of the grimoire heart knew that this grandson of Makarov had a powerful strength that could compete with Hades. For the belligerent Azuma, this was definitely an opponent that he yearned for even in his dreams. However, only now did Azuma know that he had underestimated Noah's strength. From the beginning to the end, Noah had been carrying a young girl in his arms and a young boy in his hands. While protecting these two people, he didn't even move an inch. In a short span of less than a minute, Azuma, one of the 7 families of Purgatory, had been defeated so cleanly. It must be known that Azuma was not an ordinary member of the Grimoire Heart, but one of the 7 strongest high mages in the entire Grimoire Heart, excluding the president and the vice president. If he was placed in a regular guild, Azuma would definitely be an S-rank high mage. Even in the fairy tale, Azuma's strength was enough to rival Alusha and Mira. Otherwise, he would not have been able to keep his life even after Noah released the true name of the Gi-Balg. Of course, being able to keep his life was also because the Gi-Balg was only a B+ rank noble phantasm. If Noah released the Excalibur, which was an A++ rank noble phantasm, Azuma would not even have a speck of dust left. But even so, the Gi-Balg was still an opposing noble phantasm. To be able to keep his life under the Gi-Balg of a B+ rank noble phantasm, it was enough to show Azuma's strength. If it was any other time, even if he was an opponent, Noah would frankly praise him. Unfortunately, Noah's heart was already filled with anger towards the high mage who repeatedly claimed to annihilate the grimoire heart of the fairy tale. "Did you survive?" At that moment, Noah suppressed the anger in his heart and asked Azuma in a cold voice. "Very well, tell me, where is Hades now?" As early as when Hades claimed to destroy the fairy tale, Noah had been thinking of ways to collect information about the grimoire heart. Now, under the leadership of Hades, the grimoire heart had come knocking on his door first. How could Noah bear this? So now Noah only had one idea. They had to find Hades. Hearing Noah's cold voice, Azuma could clearly feel the hidden anger and murderous intent, which made him admire him. As the strongest dark guild among the 3 major dark guilds in the Baram Alliance, whether in the light world or the dark world, the grimoire heart was in existence, feared. And as the president of the grimoire heart, Hades was the Grim Reaper in everyone's mind. Frankly speaking, even Azuma couldn't think of resisting Hades. Because of this, Azuma wanted to fight Noah, who had the same level of power as Hades. Now it seemed that Noah was not only on the same level as Azuma thought, but also on the same level as Hades. Noah simply wanted to kill Hades. So how could Azuma not admire him? Just as Azuma was about to say something, he inadvertently glanced at the young man in Noah's hand. Looking at the unconscious young man in Noah's hand, Azuma was startled at first. Then his eyes suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. At this moment, Azuma's line of sight was completely taken away by the young man in Noah's hand, and he could no longer look away. His face was also shaken like never before. After a long while, Azuma spat out word by word. Joseph. The name that came out of Azuma's mouth made Noah's eyes shrink as well. Jerf. Noah naturally wouldn't forget this name. Not only because this name was the name of the most evil dark mage in the history of the magic world, but also because the Tower of Paradise that made Alusha suffer for the first half of her life had a lot to do with this dark mage. Even Jalal's life was ruined because of Gerald. He even died without a burial place, buried in the sea with the Paradise Tower. And just now, Azuma had called the boy in Noah's hand the name of the greatest villain in human history. Thinking of the curse that belonged to God and the darkness that could suck out all life, Noah couldn't help but turn his gaze to the unconscious youth in his hand. He is Jerf. When Noah's attention was diverted, Azuma reacted. It seems that it's not time for me to die here. Azuma made a prompt decision. We have to bring back the news that Jeffrey is in the hands of Fairy Tale. Therefore, Azuma rushed towards a burning tree and crashed into it. The scorching flames once again burned Azuma's body. Ah! Azuma let out a low scream. You! Noah was completely stunned. Azuma, on the other hand, gritted his teeth desperately, endured the pain, and hugged the tree without caring about the burning flames. In the next second, Azuma's body suddenly melted into the tree and disappeared. This guy was actually willing to go to such an extent in order to escape from Noah's hands. At this moment, Noah finally reacted. He closed his eyes and extended his sensing ability. Unfortunately, Azuma's aura had already disappeared without a trace. Noah slowly opened his eyes and looked at the forest in front of him that had turned into a sea of fire. He then looked at the youth in his hand and fell silent. Jerf, the dark mage who had existed 400 years ago, and was still causing various effects in this world. Was such an existence really the harmless-looking youth in his hand? Chapter 1134. At a corner of Celestial Wolf Island, in the camp of Fairy Tail, a group of magic shooters from Fairy Tail had gathered together. Not only were there magic shooters from Fairy Tail, but there were also a few people who were clearly not from Fairy Tail. They were tied up and thrown outside the camp, and there was another guild's emblem embroidered on their clothes. It was the guild emblem of Grimoire Heart. With Noah as the leader, the group of magic shooters from Fairy Tail were all gathered in the tent, either sitting or standing. The atmosphere was more or less heavy. This is what happened. Lebby pointed at the people who were tied up outside the tent and said to everyone present. When Julian and I were looking for the mausoleum of the first president, Mavis, we coincidentally encountered these members of Grimoire Heart. If it weren't for Elusha and Mira rushing over in time, I'm afraid that Julian and I would have been defeated. We also felt that something was wrong and rushed over. Elusha continued Lebby's words. Then we found that Lebby and Julian were in a difficult battle, so we took action together and took down these people. Then we found out from these people that they were the vanguard of Grimoire Heart. They were sent to Celestial Wolf Island to be the vanguard. Mira said worriedly. According to them, most of the Grimoire Heart's troops are on their way to Celestial Wolf Island. That's why Elusa and I sent a signal. This was the reason why the signal flare of an enemy attack appeared. After knowing the whole story, everyone looked at each other and could see the anger in each other's eyes. President Precto. Makarov clenched his fist, his eyes full of anger. Do you really want to destroy Fairy Tail with your own hands that much? He is no longer the second president of Fairy Tail. Laxus hugged his arms and snorted coldly. Right now he's just an enemy of our Fairy Tail, Hades of the Grimoire Heart. I don't care whether he is Hades or Precto. Naz slammed the table and said angrily. He actually hindered our S-rank magic shooter advancement exam. I will not forgive him. The one who felt the most empathy for Naz's words was Kana. In the corner, Katrina gripped her arm tightly and gritted her teeth. She glanced at Kildas with anger, regret, and unwillingness in her eyes. Undoubtedly, I came to participate in this exam with great determination. Kana. Lucy hugged Kana gently, her face full of sorrow. Now is not the time to talk about this. Gray looked at Makarov and said, What should we do now? Retreat? Gray's words made everyone present react differently. Don't joke around. Naz objected with all his might. Since the enemy has come to our door, why should we retreat? Many people nodded and agreed with Naz's words. Obviously, many of the people present had the idea of simply having a showdown with the Grimoire Heart right here and now. This was the Fairy Tail. They were hot-blooded and would never allow others to bully them. However, there were also calm people. If we plan to fight, then we must consider the strength of our side. Elusha looked around at everyone. The opponent is the strongest Dark Guild in Baram's alliance. Not only is their influence huge, but they also have a powerful enemy that we can't ignore. As the guild leader, Hades' strength is above our guild leader. According to Noah, there are also 7 extremely powerful magic shooters called the 7 Families of Purgatory. Kildas narrowed his eyes. Didn't you already fight with one of the Dark Guilds in Baram's alliance, the 6 Demon Generals, Oration Cease? Those 7 magic shooters are all comparable to those guys, aren't they? Not only that, in addition to guild leader Hades in Grimoire Heart, there is also a vice guild leader whose strength is above the 7 Families of Purgatory. Mira shook her head. The enemy's strength is unprecedentedly strong. If we plan to fight, then we must be fully prepared. If there is no chance of victory, retreating here is not a bad idea. Hearing the words of Alusha, Mira, and Kildas, some of the calmer people nodded in agreement. But, Wendy nervously raised her hand and expressed her opinion. We also have Brother Noah and 4 S-rank magic shooters, Brother Naz, Brother Gray, and Brother Gadjaloo. There shouldn't be a problem, right? Well said. Wendy. Naz fiercely clenched his fists and shouted. We Fairy Tale will never lose to a guild like that. I believe so. This sentence made everyone's heart burn with a burning belief. That's right, the enemy was unprecedentedly strong. But how could Fairy Tale be weak? Not to mention that Makarov was one of the 10 most powerful magic shooters in the continent. Laxes and Kildas were also people who had the ability to become one of the 10 most powerful magic shooters. Even Alusha and Mira were not comparable to ordinary S-rank magic shooters. In addition to Noah, who had once forced Hades to retreat, and the rest of the frontline combatants like Naz and Gray, it could be simplified in one sentence, and that was what was there to be afraid of. In fact, this was also Noah's thought in his heart. Noah did not feel that Fairy Tale was weaker than Grimoire Heart at all. Moreover, the current Noah was no longer comparable to the previous Noah. Even if the 1-month adaptation period for authority was not over, just the Godslayer's curse resistance was enough to make Hades suffer. Not to mention, Noah still had a treasure trove that carried thousands of treasures that were enough to attack a city. Aster, who had a contract with him, had a curse resistance that was above Noah's, and could cut off all magic and curses. Therefore, Noah also stared at Makarov, and his voice was strong and powerful. Grandfather, let's fight. If it was said that Naz's words made everyone's heart burn with a burning belief, then Noah's words made everyone's belief turn into a flame of struggle. And of course, the flame in Makarov's heart was no less than anyone else's. If you want to make a move against Fairy Tale, then you have to be prepared to be annihilated. Makarov stood up and like a glaring King Kong, his short body rose with a terrifying aura like that of a giant. The war has begun. Little brats. Therefore, the flame in everyone's heart seemed to have been poured with a bucket of oil, and it was unprecedentedly high. Noah glanced at the young man lying in the other tent, and then looked at the sky outside with a glint in his eyes. If you're here for Jerf, then let today be the last day for you to pursue the so-called abyss of demons, Hades. Suddenly, a more terrifying aura than Makarov's flashed across Noah's body. In the sky not far from Heavenly Wolf Island, a pitch-black magic airship flew over. In the hall of the airship, Hades, who was sitting on the throne, looked at Heavenly Wolf Island through the glass window, and a dark emotion appeared in his fierce eyes. Let's begin. The battle between the fairy and the demon.